First college football memory for me. I don't know if I had watched college football before this. I would have had to have watched college football or built up some type of allegiance before this moment, but this is the first moment that I remember. It was back in 1976. The conclusion, not the actual game. I don't know how much of the game I watched, but for me to work up this much fervor and frenzy and hatred and angst, and again, just flat out hate for one team and individual, I don't know what was going on before that. Again, that I watched, that I heard, that I read, it couldn't have been a whole lot. I was barely 8. 1976. Weekend before Thanksgiving, of course, as was customary then. My first memory of college football was watching Bo Schembechler be carried off onto the field on the shoulders of his players following a 22-0 win in the horseshoe against Ohio State. And I was so angry that I remember shaking my fists like inches, millimeters from the TV screen. Just so angry. Now, it's funny that I have no recollection of the football viewing before that. I guess when you grow up in Ohio, it's just natural. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody being here. And thank you so much for joining us on this 12:15 show. Hopefully, I hope that you weren't waiting long. I did schedule this for noon Eastern time. However, I did leave a note, and hopefully you caught it, that I may be, and I certainly was, a few minutes late, 10 or 15 minutes late, because I had other appointments and I was out and about and on the road. So I just made it back, and I am ready to talk college football with all of you. So our topic for the day, villains. There was nothing that happened today or yesterday that made me think of this topic. So I don't know why this hit me. Something subliminal, something maybe in one of the comments or something that was discussed here in the last few days or something just made me think about, okay, villains. Well, we have villains in life. Of course, we grow up watching Superman and Batman and the Super Friends and whoever else they've got today. I don't even know. And you comic book and like staunch comic nerds and geeks can go back to the 1940s to recite who, of course, I'm aware of Captain America and Aquaman and Green Hornet and all those guys. So anyway, there's a villain, of course, and they're evil. And then there's the superhero, the hero. Now, we bring this to college football, and the villain isn't necessarily a villain. They're not necessarily a bad person, an evil person. They didn't necessarily do anything wrong. They just had the wrong shirt on. They just had the wrong jersey on. They have the wrong helmet with the wrong decal on the helmet. And this is going to become less and less common, or maybe more and more common with the transfer portal, in terms of having allegiances in which my guys are always my guys and your guys were always your guys. So you're the enemy. We're the good guys. You're the bad guys. That's deteriorating, unfortunately, because everything that I'm talking about here is not serious. It's in fun. It's in quotations, hate week type material. But within a college football context, yes, we hate the rival. We hate the enemy. We hate them. Who are those for you? So this could go two different directions for you. This could be, again, in the sports and college football context, it could be the rival or the team or the player that put you down a number of times, that cost you a championship. That could be the villain. Or the villain could be somebody who actually isn't necessarily opposite you and your team, but you just think them to be a bad individual that did bad things and were not good for the sport, not good for humanity, and you consider them a villain for more moral reasons. That could be it. I'm sick of watching Tom Brady win. So I root against Tom Brady. I've rooted against Tom Brady for I don't know how long. Now, I don't know where that goes to, except for he is a Michigan player, but I really didn't make, of course, the connection's obvious. I knew that he played for Michigan and watched all of his games at Michigan, but it became more that I moved to the Northeast. I moved to the Northeast just a couple weeks before the Tuck Rule game is when I moved to the Northeast. I grew up a Dallas Cowboys fan, but had long since not been a Dallas Cowboys fan and was really just an NFL fan. Just loved watching the NFL, but did not have a team. Technically the Cleveland Browns, but they didn't have my heart. They still don't have my heart. There's been 2 teams that have had my heart. Well, there's been 3 teams that have had my heart, like passionately, but I just checked off the box. I'm from the Cleveland area, Cleveland Browns, check. But they didn't have my heart and don't have my heart. So I didn't have a rooting interest, but I still remember working the Patriots-Raiders game, the Tuck Rule game at ESPN. It was like my second week there, second or third week, fourth week, whatever it was. I was within my first month at ESPN, and I was working the game for international networks, and I was training. And I just remember that I don't know if it was that game that made me hate the Patriots, because there was no reason to hate the Patriots. They hadn't won too much then. That was their first go around. So why would I hate the Patriots? Maybe it was the combination of the Patriots fans around me, and it was the combination of that and then watching them be given this gift. Wasn't their fault. Wasn't even the officials' fault. It was the rule book's fault. It was the people that instituted the idiotic rule that makes no sense. Wasn't the officials' fault. They were just enforcing the rule. The rule is beyond idiocy, and it's been changed since then. And this launched the Patriots dynasty, of course. They should not have won that game. The game should have been over. But they won the game, and so I instantly hated the Patriots. And they hadn't done anything. So that's kind of odd. But just, you never know where your heart's going to take you. So it's odd, logically, but you just, if you're like me, you root for whoever captures your heart. You don't make a choice. Do you? Do you make a choice who you root for? Did you make a conscious choice? Did you make a decision who you root for? Or did you just go wherever your heart went? I went with my heart. That's how I became a fan of the teams. Now, 2 of the teams were within the vicinity and they were local teams. And so I had that influence around me, but I didn't have that influence in my family or really amongst my friends. It was more just kind of in the area. And so that obviously influenced me. I became an Ohio State football and basketball fan because they were the state team, and I became a Cleveland Indians fan because of watching them on TV. But before that, Dallas Cowboys, even at the very outset of my football viewing the Minnesota Vikings and Fran Tarkenton. Well, nobody influenced me there. I just was attracted to it. I was just attracted to his play and that team. And so for about a year, and he was right at the end of his career, and my dad on one. And for those of you all across the nation on the eastern half of this nation that are preparing and buckling down for the blizzard that is to overtake us at some point, my dad drove us through a blizzard to get to the Silverdome. I don't think to the Silverdome, but back from the Silverdome, like a 5-hour drive through a blizzard so that I could see Fran Tarkenton in what turned out to be his third to last game of his career. So God bless my dad. God rest his soul. Rest in peace, Dad. Thank you so much in 1978 for taking me to the Silver Dome in Pontiac to see the Detroit Lions thump the Minnesota Vikings 45-14 so I could see Fran Tarkenton run around and throw a few passes and get annihilated, but still got to see Fran Tarkenton play his third to last game of his career. The Vikings then lost to the Raiders the next week, but still made the playoffs and still won the division, even though they lost the last two games of the season at 8-7-1 and lost to the Rams in the playoffs. And that was Fran Tarkenton's last game on New Year's Eve. Oh, man, I'm going down memory lane here. All right, but I want to hear from you. Villains. Also, of course, we are the hub of college football discussion, debate, and analysis right here at the Voice of College Football. So, of course, we're going to talk about what's going on right now. And we had a big transfer signing announced just here in the last hour or two. And so we will go through the news as well. And, of course, you don't have to stay on topic. If you call into the show, if you guys want me to set up the phone lines, I didn't because I was late and I just wanted to get on here, but I will set up the call lines if that's what you would like. But let's check out. Let's check out the comments first. But first and foremost, I'll let you know who I am since I didn't even take the time to go to graphics here. We just jumped on and just got right down to it here. You haven't seen me before. My name's Mark. My last name's Rogers. Mark Rogers. I know it's a very plain name, but I do like my first name. Mark Rogers. And I started a YouTube channel talking about college football 10 years ago. So this is what we do, is talk college football. So you've found a home if you love college football. If you love it so much that you'll talk about it in January/February when there's nothing going on the field. There's a ton going on otherwise. All right, so you have found your college football home. Let's tear through these right now. Ben Schellen? Good to have you here, Ben. Damn it, on my wrong account again. I don't know what that means. Ben, no, I did not forget. I don't forget. Please check out the notes. So this is why it's important to subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications, and also know when we send out notifications like we did on the community page. I don't know how that shows up on your phone. For me, for channels that I subscribe to and frequent, I think it's more about what channels you frequent the most. The subscription's nice and it's amazing, and I hope that, of course, you subscribe here at the Voice of College Football, but it's more about where you frequent on YouTube is what they're going to send you. And based on my traffic, I see what I frequent. And so the community message today was, I'm probably going to be 10 or 15 minutes late. So did not forget about you. Hummus Hero, good to see you. Alan, great to see you. The man here says, Mark, have you ever seen the picture of a young Tom Brady with his mom at the 1982 NFC Championship game? I do not believe I have seen it, nor would I want to see it. Ben, thank you so much for giving the thumbs up, even though you were wondering where I was. Hummus Hero says, growing up as a kid in Ohio during the 80s and 90s, I felt a lot of that, Mark. I think that was during my Bo Schembechler story. I will say this as well. It's reminding me that I would like to get a accurate gauge on our viewership, which YouTube does that for us, but in regards to their fandom. Maybe YouTube should start doing this for sports channels to ask those particular viewers and subscribers who their favorite teams are, because I want to get a good gauge on the fan bases that we have represented and how How many people? And it's going to be impossible. I know not everyone's going to respond to me, but I have already started to keep account of the people that have contacted me via Gmail. So please do that. So whether that's Dave or Hummus Hero or Ben, the man here, all you guys, as we go through the chat, please contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail and just let me know. The number one thing I want to know is who's your college football team? And I would love to have this is a pipe dream, but I would love to have 33,000 responses because we got 33,000 subscribers. Plus, we got a bunch of people that watch that don't subscribe. I don't understand that. Please subscribe. If you're not subscribed already and you watch on a regular basis, we appreciate you watching, but please subscribe. It impresses people. It actually is an indicator of credibility. It shouldn't be. I'm the same guy as when I had 100 subscribers. And I used to have to tell people that. It's funny how you get made fun of on YouTube if you've got 100 subs or 1,000 subs or whatever somebody doesn't feel is credible. And I remember having a number of conversations with people via social media or on YouTube to say, before you make fun of me, why don't you, I can tell you didn't even watch. You're just making fun of me because I've got 112 subscribers. Watch a video. Watch. So all of you, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail and let me know who you root for. Would also love to know anything else about you that you want to share, but in particular, who you root for and how long you've been watching. Dave says, best thing Clemson ever did was take a punch. Was that the best thing? Dave is backing Woody here. Yes, I got you, Dave. Yakov 22. Mark, first moment like you, and sure how much I really watched was the 1981 Sugar Bowl. So that was the 1980 season, 81 Sugar Bowl, Georgia, Notre Dame. Watched with my grandparents. I remember that game. Notre Dame, Georgia. I did not like Notre Dame growing up either. Something was instilled in me somewhere. Hatred for Michigan, that's obvious, but hatred for Notre Dame, I just think that that's kind of a national thing that a lot of people hate. I think Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Alabama are hated. Texas, I think it's hated because they seem to be rather arrogant and they haven't done anything in 12 or 13 years. But it seems as though Ohio State gets hated and Alabama and Notre Dame. Are they the three most hated teams in college football? Miami would have been when they were winning, when they were relevant on the field. They were hated. I hated Miami at one point. That's kind of dismissed, been kind of lost in the last 15 or so years. David, good to see you there. Mark, mine was Matt France missing 47-yard field goal in 1986 against the team up north that would have put the Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl, won the outright Big Ten championship. The Buckeyes still shared it with Michigan. That's why I nominate Jim Harbaugh as my villain. I posted on Twitter today promoting the show and said, and I just picked out four. Again, there's a zillion villains. It depends on who you root for. Or if you consider certain people to be villains regardless, because they're just, in your eyes, not good people. So I chose for my four pictures, and I almost selected Harbaugh, but I selected Tim Tebow. Now, here's a guy that should not be a villain. Unless you're a Florida State fan, you're a Georgia fan, I get it. He was a Gator. But what did this guy ever do wrong? We have still to, if you believe in biblical principles, obviously he's done wrong. But in terms of anything noticeably wrong, what has the guy ever done wrong? Got something scratching my leg, something in my sock. But Tim Tebow, yes, I selected him because I know that he is not liked by a lot of people. Hated even by a lot of people. So I grabbed the Tim Tebow picture, the Urban Meyer, Jameis Winston, and There were 4. I can't remember the other one. I cannot remember. Oh, Lincoln Riley. That's just happened here in the last month. Lincoln Riley, a lot of Oklahoma fans, because I hear it every week during our Oklahoma show. So there's David's comment. Ben cannot remember his first college football moment, but recalls sitting in Iraq and on TV was Oklahoma, Oregon, right at the onside kick in Autzen, 2006. Dave, Woody Hayes, Charlie Bauman, Allen, good one here. Steve Spurrier, I think he's a villain to many in the SEC. Dave says, actually, it's every Ohio State football coach except John Cooper. David, I like how you phrase that. Again, I love factual statements that just cut it the right way. Tom Brady didn't beat the 98 Buckeyes. Yes. For the record, 1-1. 1 for the Buckeyes, 1 for Brady. I thought about Lou Holtz. A lot of people not liking Lou Holtz, Roger Dodger. And again, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Let me know who you root for. I'm trying to keep count, and I know that's going to be impossible. And it's good that it's going to be impossible, that we've got more than like 52 people watching the channel, that it is impossible, but I'm going to do my best count and continue to rack. So I'm taking names and teams you root for. MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Hit me up there. Roger Dodger, Tom Landry always beat the Niners before 1981. Yes, he won 2 championship games against them in 70 and 71. The Cowboys beat the Niners the year before, 59-14. Alex asking, how do you feel, Mark, about the future of Florida Gator football? I think by all indications of what he accomplished at Louisiana and by what he's doing in recruiting, that Billy Napier understands, and it seems to be a slap in the face to Dan Mullen, but pretty obvious to all of us, that recruiting is the lifeblood of college football anywhere, but especially if you're going to compete in the SEC. He understands how important recruiting is, and he's out there and he's pulling in top recruits, and he is salvaging a recruiting class here in 2022 and marching on toward 2023. For a college football coach, it comes down to talent acquisition and then development of those individuals as players, teaching them skill sets at their position, teaching them how to grow up and how to be accountable and how to be young men and accountable to their teammates, but also the skill set at their position, and then to game plan, to build a scheme, I should say, on before the game planning for the particular opponent, the development of a scheme, identity, concepts on both sides of the ball that work for you, that work based on your beliefs, values as a football coach. I'm not talking about morally. I'm talking about what you believe in. If you grab any football coach, if offense is their side of the ball or defense is their side of the ball, there are certain concepts and beliefs that they hold true to. And then you need to be able to modernize that if needed, update it, fit it to the personnel that are on the roster, and then go from there. So you build a scheme on both sides of the ball and special teams to a certain extent. And then you work toward the game and you develop a game plan. So how good is your head coach, Billy Napier, and his staff in game planning? Well, he had a game plan for a bunch of Sun Belt teams. And they had one big opponent this past year, and they got whipped by Texas by 3 scores, which is kind of a curious outcome in a number of ways. But and then adjusting within the game. And then on top of all that, it's building, not crazy about the term, it's overused, but culture, the environment, the values of the program, the values of the team, inspiring everyone. You've got to inspire them. How you do that, there's a lot of different ways to do that. So he's checking boxes right now. All is favorable right now for Billy Napier. David says, Mark is a good friend of mine, is a Raiders fan, and he still is not over that game against the Patriots. I understand that. The New England Patriots should not be the 2001 Super Bowl 1-2 Super Bowl champion. The man here, not old enough, but would not have liked Jack Lambert. Yeah, he was a villain to many Browns, Bengals, Oilers fans. Ballard, good to see you. Newt Rockney of Notre Dame's a villain. Okay. Jim Harbaugh, yes. Yeah, Jim Harbaugh. Is he going to come back? He lost his defensive coordinator yesterday as Mike McDonald is now going back to the Baltimore Ravens as defensive coordinator. For Steve here, Rich Rod and Pitt are my villains. Yep. West Virginia fan here. Add Virginia Tech in there somewhere. So Rich Rod, because he left, even though he was your most successful coach by some measurements of all time. That's another thing that's curious. So if you root for a team and you have a successful coach and you love him, you want him there, he's your guy, then he leaves. Some fans appreciate the time spent there and the accomplishments. Other fans are bitter and resentful that said coach left. Alex, who do you think as of right now has the best chance, Mark, to recruit Florida the best out of the big three in Florida? Well, I think that Miami's in a unique position geographically. I can't prove that there are better players in Miami or the Miami area. I tend to think so, although there's plenty of Florida talent for those three teams and more. But I tend to think, and again, I haven't seen the analysis on this, that there are better players or more tremendous players in South Florida for Miami to go after. So that's just a matter of geography that you're going to have, if you're Miami, a better shot most of the time with South Florida players than players in the North, where I'm guessing Florida State fight over more players than Miami does against the other two. But that is a tremendous question. Mario Cristobal has the best track record as a recruiter at Oregon, as the head coach, and a recruiter at Alabama, and for a cup of coffee at Miami. So Mario Cristobal has the best track record. I would trust him the most because he's shown that. Sleepovers. Cheryl, good to see you. Erica's at work, but listening. Thank you, Erica. Yeah, the dude, Steve, that killed the trees at Auburn. I can picture the guy from the SEC Network documentary. I do not know the gentleman's name. When it comes to that place, that's a bit much. It's a bit much. Ricardo wants to know who's going to win the AFC and the NFC championship games. I don't have a rooting interest, really. I would be somewhat surprised if Cincinnati won. I think Kansas City's going to win. I think Kansas City's going to win that game by a couple touchdowns. And I think that the Rams and the Niners, if Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't play any better than he did last week, he better play much better. So I got to think at this point, I've got more faith in Matthew Stafford. Not that that's the entire team. It's only one player, but it's a key player. It's a quarterback. That's Stafford over Garoppolo. I like the Rams Chiefs. I hadn't thought about it before that. See, Servant, if you were here when I was talking about Lincoln Riley, yes, I posted his picture on Twitter. I knew he would come up. Iowa fans, Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, Clemson fans. Ricardo asking more NFL questions. I have no thoughts about Ben Roethlisberger. Great quarterback, one of the top 5 quarterbacks in his prime in the league. Probably a top 50 quarterback of all time, something in that range, top 30 to 50. I know statistically he's higher than that. Statistically, I think that he deteriorated quickly the last 3 to 4 years. He should retire. He's not a really good quarterback now. But he accomplished a lot. 3 Super Bowls. Pittsburgh constantly in contention, typically. Yakov 22 disliked. John Elway. Sammy Winder. There you go. And Jeremiah Castile, of course, who made the great play against Ernest Biner. Hottie Toddy coming in from ST Weasel. Hey, John, USC Trojan fan, always and forever. Just started watching. Appreciate that. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, John. Bring it up right there. John Aitken. I would appreciate. We would like to have a record of that. Steve does not like Notre Dame. And if you folks, I will take, we've only got 48 on the line. Yesterday we had maybe 150. So we had a much larger crowd to take phone calls. So I will see if anyone's interested in calling. If not, we can just continue here. I certainly want to go to the news of the day. So appreciate everybody that commented on their villain. Thank you, Servant, for encouraging everyone to hit the like button. All right. So the big news today thus far, besides that the Voice of College Football and all of us have a live stream at noon Eastern time. Of course, that was the big day in college football. John, spreading some love. It's not even listed on the college football page on ESPN, but we will get to that in just a second. So we've got Taj Harris from Syracuse, wide receiver, has transferred now to Rutgers. So he entered the transfer portal in December. Taj Harris is top 5 in Syracuse history in catches with 151 and 8th in yardage. And he is going to Rutgers. So Rutgers could use a threat downfield, and they get it with Taj Harris. We learned yesterday, and I posted a video, that Oklahoma State cornerback Bernard Converse is transferred to LSU. So LSU doing a heck of a job in the transfer portal, along with Oklahoma or with USC. And Braxton Burmeister of Virginia Tech is transferred to San Diego State. Again, we talked about Mike McDonald moving on, just 34 years old, as defensive coordinator from Michigan to the Baltimore Ravens. One of the top quarterbacks of the 2023 class, Pierce Clarkson. Pierce Clarkson has verbally committed to Louisville out of St. John Bosco in Bellflower, California. Number 89 recruit, according to ESPN. And the news I wanted to get to that I had texted to me, but I don't see it here. Okay. So it's been confirmed by Fan Nation, Saturday Down South, and I see it on SB Nation and Rivals, that Jackson Dart, former USC quarterback, who started all of about 5 games at USC, has transferred and has enrolled at Ole Miss. So Lane Kiffin's got his hands on Jackson Dart and can mold his quarterbacking style. So there you have it. Jackson Dart, 9 touchdowns, 5 picks in relief of the injured Keaton Slovis at USC last year. Jackson Dart to the Ole Miss Rebels. So Ole Miss has its quarterback for 2022. We are still awaiting word on Caleb Williams, who has now started to consider, we understand, Wisconsin. That's an interesting fit. We discussed that with our guy, Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire, and a few others, because I certainly commented on a number of shows about my thoughts about Caleb Williams and the odd possible marriage of Caleb Williams and Wisconsin. Does not seem like a scheme fit, does it? There we go. Roger Dodger, thank you so much for that. Last day for spring enrollment for USC. Well, we will see if Caleb Williams commits today. We are awaiting that. Maybe we'll go live. If Caleb Williams, based on what I've seen of your response, viewers, when there's a coaching change or a big name player that announces a transfer, I guess we should go live with Caleb Williams. Spartan Marinelli, appreciate you being here right here at the Voice of College Football, ready for football season to start. The man here, always with the tremendous nostalgic slant themed questions. The man here. Mark, did you ever wear isotoner gloves as a result of the Dan Marino commercials? This came across my mind yesterday because I took a walk. I took a very short walk because it was about 12 degrees, but I decided, I need to get outside. It was sunny, but it was ridiculously cold, as it is today. Although it's a bit warmer today, but still like 25 degrees. So I went for a short walk, and I did something that I would have never done as of 5 years ago. Put gloves on. No, I didn't wear gloves. From the time that my mom, I don't know at what age you were when kind of your parents just kind of, within reason, let you decide what you're going to wear, if you're going to put a hat on, if you're going to put gloves on, those sorts of things. But at some age, fairly young, that was no longer monitored. Therefore, no, didn't wear gloves. No gloves for me. I was the guy when we played backyard football in the winter. I'd have like a windbreaker on. That's not me now. I'm bundled up now. But I was telling cold weather stories a few weeks ago for some reason and telling stupid stories. But I was the dad at the bus stop in the 8-degree weather that had shorts on. So no gloves required there, man from here. That's it, Brian. I'm an old guy. I'm officially an old guy. I've got to glove up. Spartan Marinelli, 87. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. We are asking everyone to contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Let me know who you root for. I would like to have as accurate account as possible in terms of viewers, who you root for. So let's say I get 10,000 responses. I know that I got 12% Ohio State fans and 8% Michigan fans and 11% Miami fans and 13% USC fans and whatever. Roger Dodger. Mark rents cars from Alamo because OJ jumps over suitcases to get to the counter. Alamo. OJ was a Hertz guy. Lewis, we want to have you officially on record. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Let me know that you're a Michigan fan. Brian's going to let me know that he's a Sacramento State fan. Or he's predicting one response from Sacramento State. The subject of the email could say just whatever you wanted to say. I do get tons of emails, so I guess it should be something distinct, but hey, it's going to be in bold. It's going to be unread, so I will get to it. Oh, Nebraska fan, LSU fan. You could put that there. All right, folks. Do we want phone calls? Does anybody want to call? If you want to call, I'll set up the call-in system. I did not off the top of the show because I was late. I didn't want to back up the show anymore. Still working on conference rankings. Keep that in mind. Still working on conference rankings. So we've released almost all the conferences, 7 or 8 of the conferences. And we are basing that on the 1 through 130 rankings that I released right after the season and the evaluation of the results on the field. I got to tell you that if I don't like the results, I will acknowledge the results say that these are the best conferences 1, 2, 3, down through 10. But I will say another way to do it in a very, very, very subjective way, but it's interesting, is line up the conferences against each other. So let's say we take the SEC and the Big Ten, and we rank the teams based on the standings. We rank the teams for 2021, 1 through 14. 1 through 14 in the SEC, 1 through 14 in the Big Ten, and we start to pair them off. Who would win this game? Well, I did that a number of times a few years ago, and then I got to the point where trying to decide who would win one game, I didn't think was very fair or effective. So I thought, let's try to determine who would win 10 games, because anybody could win one game, a one-game match. But who do we think? And again, this is completely subjective, but this could be another video series coming out. So for the Big Ten, who is that? Well, it's going to be Michigan, the best team in the Big Ten. Right, Ohio State fans? Michigan, the best team in the Big Ten. And Georgia, I think we saw that one. But how many times would Georgia beat Michigan in 10 games? Well, based on what we saw on the field, it certainly looks like 10. I don't think it is, but it looked like 10 out of 10. Georgia, Michigan. There's your game. 2 seed, Ohio State. Alabama. Heck of a game. Alabama, Ohio State. There's your 2 seed game. Your 3 seeded game. Third best team in the Big Ten, according to the standings. Michigan State, 3 seed. 3 seed in the SEC. Ole Miss. Ole Miss, Michigan State. Who wins? 4 seed. We go to Iowa, correct? We would then go to Iowa. That's the 4 seed in the Big Ten. Don't necessarily think that they were the 4th best team in the Big Ten, but the 4 seed in the Big Ten, Iowa. 4 seed in the SEC, Kentucky. Kentucky, Iowa. Well, they played. That game went down to the wire. That could be a 5-5 series. Could be. 5 seed in the Big Ten. How about Wisconsin? Wisconsin, Minnesota, Purdue. Any of those 3 could be the 5, 6, 7. That's the 5, 6, 7 lineup. Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin. But let's say Wisconsin is the 5 seed in the Big Ten. Against the 5 seed in the SEC, Texas A&M. Wisconsin, Texas A&M, 2021. Who wins that? Would you guys watch that series? Would you guys get into that series? Let me know. I may or may not do that. Lisa's here. And we've got people voting for who would win these games. Steve makes Notre Dame a villain. Having their own national TV contract makes them annoying. Lonnie, McCallop, Oregon is also the big spoiler this. Lonnie, I haven't done this for a long time, but I'm going to do it right now because I have not seen, I would have remembered this handle. I have not seen Lonnie here in the live chat before. Lonnie, I want to know who you root for. You can leave it there in the live chat, of course, but we are taking a poll, a survey to get a gauge on our fan base, our viewership. So please, everybody that's hearing me right now, hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail and let me know who you root for. You can tell me anything else you want about yourself or the teams you root for, but your college football team. And would love to know how long you've been watching. So Lonnie, a big welcome to you in the form of welcome to the voice of college football. Would love to know who you root for and how long you've been watching. Lonnie, McCallop, Oregon is also the big spoiler. This. George, Florida Gator fan, does not need to write me, except there are no favorites here at the Voice of College Football. We're all the same. So, George, I would like to have you on record. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. I'm putting together a list. And then when we get thousands and thousands of names, I'm going to start to do the math and figure out what fan bases are most represented here at the Voice of College Football. Okay, Willie says set up the call-in. Because Willie said set up the call-in. Super me? Get out the John Boy. I don't really know what that means. If that's a super chat, we will always accept super chats here at the Voice of College Football. But super me, like supersize is good. I don't know what you mean. Sorry, get out the John Boy. Email me, MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail. And Willie wants the call in. George says he can't call in because he's in the middle of something. So I think George believes we should just not even consider it. All right. So Willie, we're going to do that. Does everybody that's on right now know that we've got 25 team channels? So we've got 25 team channels. North Carolina fans, I have to admit, I have not tended to your channel well. I can only do so much. There's one of me, there's 25 channels. So most of them are humming along pretty well. North Carolina's been a bit neglected. Wisconsin has been neglected. And those are really the only two that have been really, well, Auburn and Tennessee have been somewhat neglected too. Also, I want all of you to let me know who you would like to have on for a guest. If you have beat writers, broadcasters, analysts, whomever they are, YouTubers that you would like to see here at the Voice of College Football, let me know. And don't put it in the live chat because I'm not going to see it and take record of it. If I see it, it's gone out of my brain 13 seconds later. I need it somewhere where I can keep it. But if there are writers, 247 Sports, Rivals, The Scoop, The Athletic, wherever, CBS Sports, Yahoo, wherever, writers, analysts, play-by-play guys, whoever, YouTubers that you would like to see here at the Voice of College Football, let me know. And then you know what's most effective. Even though I have a pretty strong success rate of reaching out to people and getting them on, you know what's most effective is when you guys go on Twitter, tweet them, hey, you should be on the Voice of College Football. They take more notice of that than they do if I just reach out to them. If they know that people want to see it. We had an individual last week who I was not aware of until I did not know that they were a big fan of this show until last week. They don't comment. They don't get in the live chat. None of that. Well, they just watch. Didn't realize they were a big fan until last week. And they also are a big fan of Zach Smith and his Menace 2 Sports platform. And this person really wanted Zach and I to get together, and they made that happen. There you go. Yeah, 25 team channels. So here's the priority. If you are a Notre Dame fan, absolutely subscribe to our Notre Dame channel. We had Nathan Erbach on last night. Those videos are being posted over the next few days. Nathan does a tremendous job breaking down Notre Dame football. We discussed what's going on with Marcus Freeman. I almost said Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman and company. But the reason I bring up Notre Dame in particular is if you could care less about Notre Dame, but you want us to grow here at the Voice of College Football, subscribe to our Notre Dame channel. That's the next priority, Notre Dame. They are the closest to 1,000. We need to push everybody past 1,000 subscribers. It's key to the YouTube algorithm. 1,000 subs. They start to take you seriously at 1,000 subs. So please help us get Notre Dame past 1,000 subs. And really all our channels, but first and foremost Notre Dame because they are the closest. Thank you for pushing Alabama just here in the last 10 days past 1,000 subs as well. All right, I'll set us up. I may have to go get my charger because I don't know if I can trust 62%. I don't know if I can trust 62% to take us through a call-in show. And I thought I had my block down here, and I don't. I'll be right back. The call-in system is hot. The lines are open. So give me a call, 860-499-3332. I will post the number at the bottom of the screen, 860-499-3332, as soon as I let all of you also know that when you shop Amazon, use the link in the description section of any of the videos. So if you're going on Amazon to do any shopping, understand that if you use the link that we provide, there's no difference. It doesn't cost you a penny, and it's the same shopping experience. Exactly the same. Regardless of what you see when you go on there, it's just another Amazon page. You're going to see a product that I had to select. It was forced on me by Amazon to select a product to display. Just go right past it. Move on with your shopping. So when you shop Amazon, please use the link that we provide in the description section of the videos. And our number again is 860-499-3332. First caller, welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Mark, how you doing today, sir?
I am doing well, Michael. How are you?
Not bad, just finishing up lunch and watching your show. Hey, I got a question to ask you with the villains and stuff like that. Did you consider, you was real young back in the, you kind of was in the 80s and stuff.
I'm young right now, Michael.
Being that you were a Cleveland fan, do what?
I'm young right now. What are you talking about? Still young.
I know, I'm just messing with you. But
So-
no, did you consider John Denver, the Denver Broncos a villain back in the 80s when he was a diehard Cleveland fan?
For me?
Yes.
No. I was not a Browns fan. Could care less about
I thought he
Browns.
was.
No.
Oh, no, that's right. He was a Cowboys. That's
was a
my
Cowboys
fault.
fan.
Sorry about that.
So what happened, Michael,
Yeah,
was
but no.
I was a Cowboys fan, and then they fired Tom Landry, and I was done with them. Done. And
Yeah.
then I just
That's what
I love the NFL, and love
Mhm.
the NFL. But after that, I just didn't care who won. I just watched the games. And then when the Browns, of course, as you well know, they went to Baltimore. The franchise moved to Baltimore. Then there was a new franchise. And so they were out of the league for, 3 years? And then they came back in 1999. So
Yeah.
I decided when they came back, I thought, okay, I'm a Browns fan. I'm a Buckeyes fan. I'm basically a Cavs fan. I should be a Browns fan. And so I am technically a Browns fan and have been since then, but they don't really have my heart.
hmm Now, I do got to ask you this. Do you still follow your alma mater? If not, shame on you for not following your alma mater.
Kent State?
Yeah.
Well, I follow
I mean,
college
they've had
football, but no, I'm not following Kent State. I know who their quarterback is, Justin Crum.
No, I didn't. Yeah, no, I didn't know if he still kind of. I mean, I know you're a diehard Buckeye fan, but I didn't know that's like with me being a diehard Purdue fan and what got you and stuff. But anyway, I still follow him. But no, one thing I was going to ask you was how was it? Everybody at Ohio State has had somewhat success with Michigan, but Cooper didn't back in the 90s and stuff.
Why?
Because I was talking with this with was having success against Michigan.
I know.
Because I was talking with David in the chat, and I guess I thought that Earl Bruce had a losing record against Michigan, but I guess not. And he does some too that he was like had the most wins in the Big Ten, or that's for winning percentage or something. I can't remember what it was, but I thought Michigan was pretty much the dominant team of the '80s in the Big Ten.
Earl Bruce, yes, had a winning record against Michigan, 5-4. 5-4, and Earl Bruce was there from 1979 through 87, and Ohio State had the best record in the Big Ten. He had the best winning percentage in the Big Ten. So if you want to go by that, Ohio State was the best team in the Big Ten during the 80s, although that does not count 1988 and 89. And Michigan won the Big Ten championship those 2 years and went to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, because when you're like, because I know Iowa had success in Illinois and stuff like that. But no, as far as Jones and stuff like that, for me, back when I was growing up and stuff like that, late 80s was John Malkovich from when he was at Illinois. Because he just looked like he was a creepy person that should be a bad guy in Hollywood movies and stuff. It was just something about him that just looked weird about him.
Didn't like John Malkovich.
He was a good football coach.
Okay. Yeah, he went to the Kansas City Chiefs, of course.
And stuff like that. But no, if there's one coach that is not in coaching right now that could be back in coaching today from like the 80s and 90s and be successful, who do you think it would be from the Big Ten?
It could be a lot of guys. So you're talking about we're going to rewind their age to 1985, let's say, and bring them back.
Bring them back to today's style football.
Well, if you're just talking about throwing the football around, the guys that would come to mind, of course, Purdue and Illinois probably threw the ball better than anyone in the conference, and Iowa to a certain extent. Purdue and Illinois, though, with multiple quarterbacks, seem to be the most progressive. Leon Burnett at Purdue and Mike White and John Malkovich, you mentioned, at Illinois, when they had guys like Jack Trudeau and Dave Wilson and Jeff George. And all of those guys at Jason Verduzco at Illinois. So it was a fun time in the Big Ten in the 80s because you didn't know what was going to happen. There were better programs and then there were the lesser programs, but it wasn't just nailed down to one or two teams. Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State, Purdue, they all won or shared Big Ten championships during the 80s.
But no, the thing I was trying to figure out is like with Bo Schembechler, Earl Bruce, or John Cooper, maybe like with George Prolis or even Mike White, which one of those coaches do you think with their coaching style would be successful today? That's what I was asking. Not the teams itself, but the way they coach itself.
Yeah. I think successful people.
Do you think that would be hard to do?
I think successful people are successful people, and they can change schemes and learn and adapt and hire the right people. So the great coaches are the great coaches. So the obvious choice would be Bo Schembechler because he was the best and most successful coach during that time frame.
And if I'm not mistaken, also didn't him and like Earl Bruce and John Cooper also run like kind of an offense they did today and stuff? Was like when they had Harbaugh and I'm trying to think something was John Wangler, Jim Harbaugh, and with Ohio State, like Art Schlichter and Mike Tomczak. One of those kind of offenses, kind of like they are today, but a little bit toned tempo different.
Did they run offenses like they do today? No.
Yeah, were they kind of like spread offenses back then? That's what I was asking. In your opinion.
No, they weren't. Not at all. Now, did they throw the ball more in 1985 than they had a decade earlier? Absolutely. Mike Tomczak, Jim Carsados, starting with Art Schlichter, Ohio State, even when Woody was still there in 1978 in Art Schlichter's freshman year, which was a disaster from a passing standpoint, Woody still loosened up and threw the ball. They threw the ball a lot, enough for Art Schlichter to throw 21 interceptions his first year. But the style of play, if you just go to YouTube and look up, throw in any game, 1981, Ohio State, Minnesota, and you're going to see Ohio State in the I formation with a fullback. You're going to see Art Schlichter almost on every pass play, he's going to play action pass, and he's going to turn his back on the defense, and they're going to have wide receivers who are going to be in 3-point stances. They're going to have a tight end, if not two. No, the offense looked much different.
Because I thought Ohio State, when Chris Carter was there, and I'm trying to think of a couple of the other receivers when Carter was there, they kind of ran a spread type offense back in the mid to late 80s and stuff. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, they threw the ball more often than they had before. But in terms of the style, no. Well, they had two wide receivers on the field and a tight end.
All right, but I'm trying to think, who was the other receiver they had when Carter was at Ohio State?
Well, they had Mike Lenise. Mike Lenise, mostly it was Mike Lenise, so Carter was there he was only there for 3 seasons, 84, 85, 86. And then he was suspended in 87, so he decided to go pro.
I thought they had like another receiver that went to the NFL that had a successful career like Chris did. But I can't remember.
Well, right after Carter, they had Bobby Olive and Jeff Graham and Brian Stabline. They had 3 receivers on some pretty marginal Ohio State teams that all 3 played in the NFL. And Jeff Graham had really good seasons in the NFL.
I think it was one with Giants. I'm trying to remember who the tight end was back then.
John Frank.
For Ohio State.
John Frank won Super Bowls at San Francisco.
Yeah, that's true. I can't remember who it was. I know they won the Super Bowl. No, I was wanting to reminisce and go back to a little bit old school and ask and stuff like that. But anyway, I think it's too much every time. I was just saying thanks for taking my call and have a great weekend. Stay warm.
Thank you, Michael. You as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Michael leads us off. Boiler up. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line? Hello?
Hey, you've got Matt out Mustang.
Hey, who am I talking to?
This is Matt out Mustang.
Oh, I can't make out your phone call very, very well. It's just kind of garbled. Is there anything that you can do about that?
This is.
Oh, his phone line dropped. All right, so it wasn't the best of connection. So whomever your phone line just dropped, give us a call back. Hopefully we'll have a better connection next time around. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. It's me, Reasonable Gump. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. What's going on today?
Well, I this morning saw that you saw your update. Saw you'd be doing a live stream today, so I set an alarm for it. And that was right after I had watched your hilarious rant of the when you realize that Ohio State doesn't play SEC teams out in the regular season. Not that itself is that much of a funny topic. It was more watching the evolution of your face as you started to think about that for a second.
Yeah, when
anyone hasn't seen that, you need to go watch it.
when you know something like it's not new information to you, you know it, but you didn't really put it in perspective that way before, and you just kind of realize something that way. That's what happened to me.
It happened live on camera.
Yeah, I think it's pathetic. I think I don't have another word for it. That's one of my favorite words. That if I really want to put somebody in their place, or a program in its place, just to call them pathetic. I just think I don't think Ohio State's pathetic. I think that at some point they should be scheduling. If you are the best football program. If you're arguably during this time frame, I'm not talking about right this second, but over this time frame, arguably the best football program in the country, and you're certainly in the top 5, and you are most likely the best outside the SEC during this entire time, and is certainly Notre Dame and Michigan had their runs early in that 34 years, but since the last 20 years, it's been Ohio State, way over those two. Okay. You are who you are. and the best conference in the country for the last at least 15 years is obvious, you should be scheduling out of conference games against them. That's what I would be doing. Not like every year we got to play somebody in the SEC, but half the time, forget, why are they Washington, Cal? They've scheduled, oh my word, some of these series they've scheduled during this time. They had a home and home with Cal. That was their big game. 2012 and 13. Cal. That was their big out of conference series. Miami sucked when they scheduled they had Miami in 2010 and 11. They sucked. They were horrible. You know, they weren't horrible. They were they were 7-6. Okay, that's a good series, and I understand. Go ahead and schedule that. That's fine. But again, they scheduled Washington for a couple years in the late 2000s. They were no good. I don't think they're dodging anyone. I just don't like their approach. They took on Texas on top of
I don't think they're dodging. The jury was never let out on why Alabama and Ohio State had been trying to schedule for the last, or since Nick Saban got there, and they only recently managed to close the deal. And even that's not going to happen for another, like 9 years or something.
Yeah.
No one really knows who was being difficult there. I think most people think that Ohio State wanted a home and home and Alabama wanted a neutral, and they couldn't really agree on it. But I don't think Ohio State's dodging anyone. I think it more has to do with, there's always been some sort of you probably agree with this, there's always been some sort of a handshake deal connection between the Big Ten and West Coast schools. Yes. It's been going back since the Rose Bowl became Big Ten and Pac, and it would have been Pac-8 at that point, I think. 1937, I think it was 36, 37, one of those two. And that's why you said that you just brought it up. Ohio State schedules Washington and Oregon and UCLA and Cal and all these people, but rarely do they venture to the southeastern part. And it's always been like that. It's not just Ohio State. It was a long time before Southern schools could get taken seriously in college football anyway. So I think it has something to do with that. I just don't think the people who are in charge, their first thought is not to schedule a Southern school. That's just my opinion on it. But I don't think they're necessarily trying to dodge anyone. Although the most head scratching one to me is the fact that they only played Notre Dame 6 times in their history, and I think 2 or 3 of those are bowl games.
Yeah,
maybe even 4.
And
that's the head scratching one. Since Notre Dame's like 2 or 3 hour drive from it.
That's it.
I don't live up there, but yeah,
that's it. Ohio State did sign a series. Well, they signed a series with Tennessee and they signed a series with Georgia that got canceled. And somebody can probably explain this better than I, but it had something to do with the realignment of the conference and the number of conference games, and then them signing some kind of agreement. And again, I don't know that there was some kind of formal announcement, but it was known that the Pac-12 had something to do with it. The Big Ten's relationship with the Pac-12 and scheduling more non-conference games against the Pac-12. And then the Big Ten had 8 conference games up until 2016. They went to 9 conference games, so they eliminated 1 out-of-conference game. So they canceled the Georgia and Tennessee series, Ohio State did. So they did go out and schedule those series, but the bottom line, they didn't get played because of this allegiance to the Pac-12. If oh my word, I would tell the Big Ten if I was Ohio State, you know what, the Pac-12 sucks. We don't need to play them. You know, well, I'm not saying we're going to refuse to play them, but we've got other priorities. We've got other priorities. We need to earn some respect for this league and ourselves. Not that we need to earn respect, but still the SEC, we're going to go out and play the best teams in the SEC on a semi-regular basis. We don't need to prove ourselves against Washington. You know, it's just, and they got Washington coming up like next year or the year after. Yeah, they got a series with Washington that I'm highly looking forward to.
Let's move on to your topic today. Villains. Well, this one's pretty obvious. isn't it, Mark? The villain of college football is Alabama, right? They're the
Sure.
they're the Death Star. I've heard that
Yes.
more times than I can count. So this kind of ties into what I mentioned the last time I called about what I want to talk to you about. So this is a good coincidence. All right. So something I hear not a lot, but enough in real life and on here and on other shows. And tell me if this sounds familiar. Someone talking about how, well, Alabama used to suck before Nick Saban. They would probably still suck now if they didn't get him. And this is just some sort of freak run they're going on. As soon as he's gone, then they'll go back to being what they were before, sucking. Have you heard something anywhere similar to that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. My question to you is, where does that come from? Do people not realize that Alabama was a historically good, maybe, and I'll throw them in the little argument here, the best program of all time. Do people not realize that? Do people not know the name Bear Bryant? Do people not know the championships and the winning percentage, number of games won, number of bowl games won? Do people not get that? Like, what makes people, do you think, forget that? I know I'm not accusing you of this. Of course, you're way too smart for that. But what do you think when you hear some garbage like that?
Well, I think this happens in just about any subject we could bring up, subjects that are more important than college football, that people grab a shred of evidence or a fact and they run with it. And they know how good Alabama's been. And they probably heard that they were 3-8 one year, a couple of years, 3-8, 3-9, a couple of years before Nick Saban, and that they weren't very good. And you know what the deal is? The further you separate yourself from the past, the more it becomes. There's this that any type of information or perception gravitates to one end of the spectrum or the other. Either they were great, he was great, or they suck, they were trash. And so if they can't look you up to win a national championship, then you probably sucked. And people just don't know. People just don't. As you just alluded to, if we were having this show and this conversation the day before Nick Saban was hired, talking about historic programs, even minus all the Nick Saban accomplishments, we would have an argument that Alabama is the greatest football program in history. We would say, well, they're running through a rough patch right now, but if we're putting it into context throughout history, they're in the argument, even before Saban. Absolutely.
Well, and so I guess this makes me say that I think, honestly, I mean, no one really thought about all this before social media and stuff, where we could all talk to each other every day about college football across the country. But I mean, there's an argument to be made that, yes, Alabama's obviously the villain now, but there's many times in history where that they were the villain. They won 3 championships in the 60s, and 2 of them would be undisputed, even by the people who like to say, well, they lost the bowl game afterwards. Well, that's not how they counted it back then. Won 3 more in the 70s. These are all the Bear Bryant championships, by the way. Then the one under Gene Stallings, and then the ones before that in the 40s and the 20s and 30s. So it just kind of boggles my mind so much when I hear people kind of elude that, well, none of that stuff really happened, or it only counts like right now, or a lot of people will try and say that, well, Alabama is only historically good because Nick Saban has done what he's done. Like, that's it's a mouth breather 101 when I hear something like that.
Yeah,
anyway,
it all has to be taken into account, and let's take a different extreme. A different extreme would be Clemson. And if people want to say Clemson's only good under Dabo Sweeney, okay, they are better than people give them credit for pre-Dabo Sweeney. They're a top 15 program all time, but you can't erase 7 or 8 years. You can't do that. You have to account for that. Absolutely. How many people that knock the SEC say, take Alabama and Georgia out of the SEC? How good are they? I understand your point to a certain extent, but number one, your point's still not valid because there is a ton of talent elsewhere in the SEC, number one. Number two, you can't take the 2 teams out of the SEC. They're in the SEC.
Mm-hmm. Even if you could, I've heard that one too, Mark. Even if you could, okay, take Alabama out of the SEC, but let's not go overboard here and do 2 teams. Let's just do 1. Let's take Alabama out, and let's start counting championships. Florida, what was it? 06. LSU 07. Got to skip ahead to Auburn 10.
Whoa, you missed one. Florida 08.
And then sorry, missed one. Florida 08. And then Auburn 10, and then I think you have to go to LSU again before, and then now Georgia.
Yeah.
So the take Alabama out of the SEC. I like you. I understand what they're saying. Alabama's won more than half of the championships when you're of the SEC. I think it may be exactly half now with Georgia. I haven't counted, but I understand what they're saying, and that it's really, really heavily tilted towards one team. But it's not valid at all. And even if you did it and you started comparing conferences by championships, and hell, you could probably do this even just by total wins. The SEC is still going to come ahead on that every time. I think the closest would ironically be the ACC because they got 2 from Clemson and 1 from Florida State during this TCS time period.
If we were just arguing who's the best conference today, 2021 entering 2022, and we took out Alabama, I would still say the SEC is the best conference.
Now that is interesting. Let's take a minute or two and hit that topic. So the SEC's bowl performance this year was atrocious. Was terrible. I think it was it was losing.
It started off atrocious,
and it finished because with the LSU game could have made it a tie. It could have made it 500, but they lost.
So would they go 6 and 8? Well, wait a minute. They would have gone 5 and 7 because they had 13 teams in. And Texas A&M didn't play, so they played 12 games. Take out the Georgia Alabama game, of course. So 12 games. They must have gone 5 and 7.
Because Alabama and Georgia won, South Carolina won, and then Ole Miss did not win. Hold on, who are the other teams that beat?
Hang on, let's go through the wins.
I think
Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina's 4.
Not Mississippi State.
Arkansas
beat Penn State. Yeah.
Yes. So they must have lost 7.
So
Mississippi State.
Yeah, they went 5
Florida,
and 7.
Tennessee. Anyway, I won't go through it. Yes, they must have been 5 and 7.
Particularly by the conference who self-proclaims that they're the best conference. That's atrocious. And anywhere close to a 500 record is underperforming. But if you get below 500, that's ridiculous. However, so we all agree that it's between the SEC and the Big Ten, right?
Yes.
So the one caveat we got to look at with just the bowl games, not everything else, just the bowl games, is what was the SEC's record versus the Big Ten?
2 and 1. 3 and 2.
3 and 1.
3 and 1?
3. Because Arkansas and Georgia, and didn't Kentucky beat a Big Ten team?
Yes,
Iowa. Yeah,
Iowa.
Kentucky beat Iowa.
Purdue beat Tennessee, and wait a minute. Hang on. I thought it was 3-2. Keep talking, and I'll scan my brain for a second. Keep going. Penn State beat Auburn in the regular season. Penn State beat Auburn in the regular season. That's why I had 3 and 2 in my brain.
I was just speaking just with bowl games.
Why wouldn't we count the Penn State Auburn game in the regular season?
There's no particular reason, Mark.
Okay.
I was just when I headed the conversation off, I was just talking about postseason.
All right.
But anyway, that's all I'm saying is yeah, SEC had a losing record in bowl games, but you still have to look at who they're competing against with second place, and they had a winning record versus them. So that's kind of like, holding two hands, which one weighs more, kind of.
So what conclusion are you coming to that the SEC underachieved in the bowl games, but it's still the best conference?
Yeah, because they had two teams in the national title. Honestly, if they didn't have that, then I would say that the Big Ten may have passed them this year. But it's really, really, really hard to argue when they have a winning record over the second place conference, and they had two teams in the national title. It's hard to argue with that, at least in my opinion.
3-2 is kind of inconclusive for me, but
were there really no other regular season matches between the two conferences, or is it just the Auburn Penn State?
That's it. Doesn't happen enough.
Well, there you go.
So the other thing is, though, see, I don't go with either one of these arguments. So there's some people that say, if we're going to measure these two conferences or any conferences, it really doesn't matter what's happening at the bottom. Who cares? And then there are other people that want to say they're all even. All the contests, all the matchups, all the games should be equal. I'm kind of somewhere in between. We are not measuring, I don't think, the three best teams in the SEC and the three best teams in the Big Ten. We're measuring the entire conference against each other.
Conference, yeah.
But at the same time, does Georgia whipping Michigan in the national semifinal, should that hold more weight than if Vanderbilt and Indiana played in October and somebody won 22-19? Yes, I believe it should. It just matters more. It's more meaningful. It's more important.
I'm right there with you. I think it should be worth more points, something like that. But that doesn't mean if Vanderbilt goes out there and starts losing games all over the place, that the SEC doesn't lose points for that. They do. Because they allow Vanderbilt to be a part of the conference. Therefore, you take with the good and the bad. And with Vanderbilt, it's almost always bad, in football at least. I mean, the Big Ten managed to get their version of Vanderbilt and Rutgers up to speed somewhat. They were even competitive in that bowl game that they hopped off the couch to get on a bus and go play. That was surprising.
Yeah, so that counts.
There's really no excuse for
whatever the Big Ten's bowl record was. I think it was 6-4. So they took a hit on that game, which really shouldn't. You're taking one of your worst three teams against a team that played in a conference championship game.
And you take away most of the practices they would have gotten. And you have to flush all that Christmas food and desserts and stuff that they were eating at home out of their system. Yeah. There's a lot of that. I almost never try and say, well, we shouldn't count that argument, but that's one where I could probably be convinced to not count that. And I hate the moral victory argument too, but that would kind of almost apply there. But anyway, yeah, that wraps it up. Alabama is the villain still. Villain to Alabama, I suppose, I don't even know. Who would Alabama's villain be? I guess Georgia comes to mind, but it's not like we haven't lost to other teams.
Well, Auburn's taken some things away from you at times.
True.
So reasonable.
I guess I'm going to go with Georgia just because they're likely the team that's going to be standing in our way in the SEC championship for years to come. So I'll go with Georgia.
I'll ask you this. If we did a video series where we would take all the conferences and we would seed the teams and we would match up the conferences, and really there's very little objective about this. It's mostly subjective.
Mm-hmm.
And we matched up, let's say we'll go with the Big Ten and the SEC since we're on that theme. and the 1 seed through the 14 seed and just basically say, all I'm going to do is spit out and tell you what I think would happen if they played 10 times. Or I don't know if we can provide much of a metric to determine if Alabama and Ohio State play 10 times. Can't. We have nothing to go on.
No, we don't really. I've thought about that before, but I think it would probably end up being 6-4, or no way. And there's not 10 to 14 teams. What would that be? 8-6, I guess. 8-6 in favor of the SEC. I guess that would probably be my guess, because I think Alabama and Georgia are probably going to beat the top 2 seeds in the Big Ten more often than not. But no, that's a loaded question. I'd rather honestly have more time to think about that one. I might call you back next time and answer you.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate the call.
I need to see the matchups for that. Anyway. All right, man. Get on with the show.
Okay.
Good stuff, always.
Have a good one. Appreciate it. We'll see you.
Bye.
All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, appreciate everybody being here. 860-499-3332. The number is on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Who's up next?
Hey, this is Matt.
Hey, Matt.
This is Matt in Las Vegas.
How's it going?
Hey, good. Unfortunately, you're going to be stuck with a little bit of SEC talk from me.
That's all right.
I went to Ole Miss, and so I do agree that Alabama is the villain of the SEC, but the SEC is technically the villain of all of college football, with the poaching of Texas and Oklahoma, and otherwise there would not be a quote quote alliance against them. But my main question is this: and this is just watching Ole Miss recruiting and their dabbling in the transfer portal. Is what they're doing sustainable at all? Because it seems like Lane Kiffin, who's also a great villain in college football, he seems to be taking all his spots, well, about half his spots up with transfer portal. And can you sustain that in the long run? And that is my big question that really revolves in on what's going on with that. And can teams keep that up without recruiting the high school as hard as they used to?
The easy answer is no, for a number of reasons. One is that nobody is just adding players through the transfer portal. Everybody's losing players. So I don't know what the numbers are. I would like to see, there are certainly websites out there, 247 Sports in particular, that does a nice job in different categories of tracking all of this and providing people like myself an easy access to try to find out the latest transfers so I can respond. But in terms of the net gain or loss, I'm sure that they are tracking it somewhere, but nobody's like 100%. Like we picked up 12 players. We didn't lose any. Therefore, we don't have to sign as many high school players. Everybody's fairly close to that 50-50 balance. Now, the talent addition, subtraction, quotient may not be close to equal, but the player loss versus added of all the teams that I look at is fairly close to even. So I can look it up or try to find it while we're on the line to see how much Ole Miss has lost off its roster at the same time that they're gaining players. But yeah, gaining a player for 1 to 2 years versus a 4-year commitment or would-be commitment is not going to add up from a roster standpoint.
No, and that's understandable. I mean, when you lose a Matt Corral or a Braylon Sanders or Jerry Neely, to the NFL, and of course they did pick up the running back out of TCU, which might be an upgrade over Jerry and Ely. Dart is probably not going to be an upgrade over Corral. And that's if he actually beats out Luke Altmaier for the starting job. So I can definitely understand that. The other part that I was kind of thinking about when the previous caller was talking is those Alabama teams, which he was talking about being bad before Saban. I think even all those coaches, and I'm probably wrong on this because I don't keep up with Alabama because they beat us like 90 times versus 11, is I think every single coach that they had in there at least won 9 or 10 games.
True.
Even the coaches who got fired later.
Yeah, they had good seasons.
And I think even those 3 or 4 win seasons they had, I think those were based on they hired some coach, and I can't remember his name, who immediately got fired before the season ever started.
Mike Price.
Yeah. And so that would put even a blue blood team at a disadvantage to do that. So, I mean, that is a team that even with Saban being gone is going to be a powerhouse no matter what. So I'm not worried about them falling off a cliff. I hope they do, but I doubt they will. Even with the Georges looming and Kirby Smart and I think that the new coach for Florida is going to really take them up a couple of notches because he is a Saban clone. But I just have this feeling that Alabama will be Alabama for at least another 10 years with or without Saban.
Yeah, I generally agree. I don't think that the winning percentage is going to keep pace. I think that that's just improbable, just mathematically improbable. But I think that they're going to be in serious contention for the SEC almost every year. They're going to go out and get a capable top-notch coach. Yeah, they're going to go out and get somebody. They're going to get a top 3 to 5 coach in the country. They're going to get one of the very best once Saban finally hangs it up, whenever that's going to be.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm hoping sooner than later, but he seems to be going strong, so I can't disparage him too much. But and beyond that, like I said, the fact that his coaching tree is half the SEC is insane in itself.
Yeah.
And so it's an amazing thing. I'm going to let you go because I got to pretend to get back to work.
Okay.
But love what you're doing. Thank you very much for what you do each year. If you ever want a good SEC, and I'll send him a message too. And Ole Miss guy is Neil McCready with Rebel Grove because he's not a fan. So it definitely gives you a different perspective when the person covering your team is not a fan of your team.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Well, you have yourself a great day, and thank you again.
We appreciate it. Have a good day.
All right.
And his pup there in the background having a good afternoon, apparently. All right. Let's move it on to the next. I thought there was something here in the chat I wanted to address. Now I lost track of it. That's all right. But to our previous caller, I believe it was Matt, his point you had between Gene Stallings, who won the 92 championship, and Nick Saban in 09, arriving in 07, you had Mike Dubose, Mike Price, who didn't coach, Dennis Franchione, David Shula, they all had, did I miss somebody in there? They all had decent seasons. They all had a 10-2. Mike Dubose won the SEC one year. He went to another SEC championship game. I remember a Cotton Bowl that Alabama played against Texas Tech where they were 10-2 somewhere around 2005. So it wasn't just that they were awful. Not in any such way. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is Yakov 22.
Yakov 22. How's it going?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Mark. First of all, I just want to say, as you probably saw, I wrote into you with my fandom there, and I know we had a short correspondence on email, but I enjoyed the chance to speak with you off the air.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make sure you got an accurate count or somewhat accurate count of, who people support that follow your program. So, Mark, actually, I called in. I wanted to comment on the Big Ten going down from 4 to only 3, or to 4 out of conference games. But actually, before that, I want to know if I actually wanted to share. I haven't thought about this in a while, but I share because I generally spend the winters now in South Carolina, so I don't really have to do this fall anymore. But I thought I wanted to share with you. This is a good off-season type of thing. I can say a coping mechanism to deal with the cold. It's something I grew up just down the road from you in Canton, Ohio. And one of the things I used to do is my father had season tickets to the Browns from I think approximately 1984 to 1990. I used to get to go to 2 to 3 games a year. He also would bring my sisters. And for some reason, I used to be the one that went to the later season games, the December, January, some of those playoff games too. And our seats were directly, I guess if you want to look at it from a baseball perspective, along the first baseline, almost directly behind the dugout, the Indians' dugout.
Yeah.
And the Browns, if you remember, I don't know if you were with the game there, but the Browns would come out of the Indians' dugout. And, of course, the visitors' team would come out of the visiting dugout.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, one of the loudest things and things that got me going the most in those days was when all of a sudden you could see the orange helmets emerge from the dugout. And, of course, you could hear the roar of the crowd as they were coming out for player introductions. So I particularly, as I said, for some reason, I disproportionately would go to the winter games. And as they were coming out, of course, you could see the breath. It was often quite cold. And one of the things I used to do growing up, Mark, is when I would come out of my home or wherever I was, it was a particularly frigid northeastern Ohio winter day, I would try to pretend that I was emerging from the Indians' dugout as a Cleveland Browns player. And that energy there would help me deal, especially with a night, 10 degree night or so in northeastern Ohio. That energy of coming out of the dugout would warm me up.
There you go. Whatever it takes, whatever you need to do.
Yeah. So I guess I know you're not particularly a Browns fan, but you're a northeastern Ohio guy. So maybe when you head outside in the cold Connecticut night, you could try to pretend you're coming out of the Indians' dugout and to the roar of the crowd.
That's it. That's it right there. And I can't explain to anyone who's a Buckeye at heart and native Ohioan who loves the teams there. I cannot in any way explain or excuse why I didn't grow up a Browns fan, why I did not gravitate to the Browns, nor did they attract me in any such way. Because when I was growing up, the Browns, until the Indians, and I was at this point in my 20s, until they emerged in the 90s with some good teams, the Browns were they were by far not even close the most popular team in Cleveland, and in Northeast Ohio wasn't even close. The Browns were the most popular team, but I was not a Browns fan.
Yeah, and you grew up, Mark, you were, again, I'm getting off the topic here, but for me, it's got particular interest. The heart of when they really started to become popular, I know they were popular in the 70s, and I'm not talking about in the 60s and 50s when they were winning championships, not before our time, but you were, I guess, coming of age as a sports fan during the cardiac kids years in the early 80s.
Sure.
And that's when they really, I was a small child then. I do remember the cardiac kids. I guess it would have been 6 in 1980, but I just gave away my age there, but I sort of remember them. But that's when they captured the hearts of northeastern Ohio. greater than any point since Jim Brown had left. So that I guess that is particularly interesting. Right now, you put it that way. That just when they particularly grew into the number one team in Ohio, not except for the Ohio State, and that's when you started liking the Cowboys. But although I like the Cowboys too, I'm not putting that down. So anyway, that was a coping mechanism, Mark, for when you on a cold Connecticut day, just try to pretend that you're coming out of the Indians dugout and it's January. So, Mark, I wanted to comment on I guess the change of schedule as far as the Big Ten is concerned. Hope for perhaps going from 3 to 4 out of conference games and to only 8 Big Ten games. And first, though, I know you've been the last couple of days. You mentioned your dissatisfaction that Ohio State doesn't play SEC teams during the regular season. And with that in mind, though, I wanted to, I'm sure you're aware that I guess in the later part of this decade, they are scheduled home and homes both with Alabama and Georgia. I think it's like 2026 to 2030 or so. And well, I want to ask you, Mark, now that if there's any meaning to the concept of an alliance, which we all know is quickly put together when UT and Oklahoma joined the SEC, because the Big Ten really had no way to counter that. Short of Notre Dame, there was nothing they could do to remotely equal that type of addition. If there's any meaning to the concept of alliance, Mark, how can the future games this coming decade with Georgia and Alabama, how can they, if there's any meaning to the word alliance, how can those games not be canceled?
Well, the alliance has not defined what specific steps are going to be taken. The alliance has defined its mission in regards to its synergy in a vague way of what types of activities and what topics will be addressed, and scheduling was one of those, but they didn't address how. And now in this latest statement coming from the stories that I read, the Iowa athletic director was the one that I don't know if he was the talking piece or if he just somebody tracked him down for an interview. And so he was the one that addressed what was on the table and what was being considered and why. And so that they're going to increase the number of non-conference games and therefore increase the number of games between the 3 alliance members. But that's not to the exclusion, at least not formally, to the exclusion of playing the SEC.
Of course, I know that there's no official comment on that, but I know that I've heard you mention it many times. I think along when you have the Ohio State guys on, or even in general, that if they really wanted to play hardball, that is the way to do it. To just schedule with the other alliance teams, and perhaps adding the Big 12 to that, and leaving the SEC the only possibility of playing, I guess group of 5 teams or so. So, but however, Mark, in those 4 years, those 2 games would dwarf any alliance games. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Clemson and Michigan or something like that would do something close to that. But those would be the 4 best, for 4 years in a row, the 4 by far most meaningful out-of-conference games. So, yes, I understand the concept of alliance is not, as of yet at least, officially defined. But they're, I guess you could say, for lack of a better way, the Big Ten would only be feeding the beast if those 4 games go on. There's nothing that the other 4 leagues put together could do that would remotely dent those being by far the largest games of the year, probably the largest audience of the year outside of perhaps Ohio State and Michigan in the 3 playoff games. So I'm just saying, if the concept of alliance means anything, I'm not sure how those games can go forward.
Well, we know that there's going to be preference given to, and we could have predicted this and did before the actual statement the other day, that there is going to be non-conference preference given to games being scheduled between alliance members. We don't know, again, if that's going to be formally to the elimination of games against the SEC, or that they are just going to kind of crowd out the SEC and say, well, these are the priority. First of all, we've got, well, they're opening it up potentially to more non-conference games. But if
Ohio State's certainly not going to, those 4 years is not going to play they're going to want to, that's already a tough game, a possible loss. So they're going to not play another SEC or if they're not going to play an ACC team, they're most likely going to play 3 MAC level teams for the other 3 games.
You would think so.
There'd be 2 on. Right. So those 4 years in a row,
I don't know
Ohio
that
State
they
will
should.
not play any Alliance team. Right. But I think those 4 years in a row, Ohio State will not. I know the Alliance is not just about Ohio State, but nevertheless, they are the largest team there, at least as of now. And 4 years in a row, Ohio State will not play a regular season game against any Alliance team. Most likely, I guess they could maybe they schedule a lower, perhaps the Boston College, perhaps Oregon State or so, a team that they're certainly going to beat. But they're not going to play Clemson. They're not going to play USC. They're not going to play even Cincinnati for that matter. It'll be too heavy of a schedule. So 4 years in a row, they're going to play no Alliance team or one of the least competitive Alliance teams.
Well, I got to say that what you're saying makes sense, and it's the probability, but there are teams out there that do at times make up those type of schedules.
Yeah, I don't think Ohio State needs to. I guess I was going to move on a different point here, but although I'm the one that's keep talking about this, but I actually wouldn't really want Ohio State to do. I think 8 Big Ten games is enough of a competition, especially if there's going to be a Big Ten title game, which may or may not happen if the playoff expands. But to me, 8 Big Ten games and a team like Georgia or Alabama is plenty to show off your wherewithal. You don't need another. The only other 3 games it should be are definite wins, home wins. So, I know maybe that sounds less competitive for me to say a statement like that, but to me, that would be more than enough of a schedule to even consider another competitive game.
So
but the other thing I wanted to bring up, Mark,
let me just mention one thing real quick. I'm looking at Georgia's future schedules. They have future schedules where they are playing in the same year. So they always play Georgia Tech. Now, how good Georgia Tech could be, all over the map. Currently not very good, but still, they've been good. They've got a schedule.
In the early 2000s, they were beating Georgia every year.
Well, I don't know if they were beating them every year, but
a couple. When they had Ralph Friedgen, they were generally a better team than Georgia, at least head-to-head. But
you mean Paul Johnson?
Oh, I thought in the early 2000s they had the guy who went to Maryland.
Ralph Friedgen.
He was a very good coach there. Ralph Friedgen
went to Georgia Tech?
No, I thought he went to Maryland afterwards.
Yes, Maryland.
Yeah.
Anyway, Georgia Tech has always gotten stomped by Georgia. Anyway, we won't go into that. So, I'm looking at schedules, UCLA, Louisville, Georgia Tech. I'm looking at schedules, Florida State, Louisville, Georgia Tech, Texas, Clemson, Georgia Tech, Texas, Florida State, Georgia Tech, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia Tech, Clemson, NC State, Georgia Tech. So anyway,
that's pretty competitive, Mark. Yeah, I guess when you look at it that way, that is a bigger reach than what I'm suggesting for Ohio State. But at the same time, you can only lose one of those games between all the SEC games and those 2 games. If you lose 2, you won't be in the playoffs unless it expands, of course. So you better be one of the best 4. If you better by far one of the best 4 teams in the country. You're going to lose 2 games and play in a non-playoff game that year.
Yeah, unless we get over this silliness of 2 games eliminating a team from the playoffs.
Oh, right. Well, certainly if there's an expansion, that would be easier to do. But even without that, you're right. There could be someone looks at the schedule, hey, you played Oklahoma and Ohio State as opposed to whatever other teams are in the contention. And Mark, one more thing I might want to add is as far as going to 4 out of conference games, is I know you graduated from a MAC school, and I think I mentioned I think you mentioned it too, that you particularly have a affinity for MAC football, even if you don't watch it, you just the concept of it. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that they're going to go to 4 out of conference games because I happen to think that the Big Ten hopefully will, let's just put it in the Conference Alliance, so every Big Ten team will play an ACC I'm going to add the Big 12 in their Big 12 / Pac-12 team as one of their out of conference games, and then play 3 group of 5 games. And for many of the Big Ten teams, I think that will involve perhaps 2 games against a MAC team. And I like the fact that when Ohio State plays Miami, of Ohio that is, or plays Kent State, or plays Akron, whoever it might be, that they are filling the coffers of those athletic departments and helping those teams field the football team, and for that matter, against other sports too. So I like the fact now the Big Ten teams don't need another Big Ten game. They all make plenty of money. They're going to a new deal. They're $80 million probably just from contract alone. So they don't need a ninth Big Ten game. They could help the sport in general by playing a additional out of conference game. And and I particularly like the MAC, although it could be other leagues as well. So that's another reason, Mark, I'd like to say I'm looking forward to them dropping a Big Ten game and going to 4 out of conference games.
So do you think this is a problem? Well,
I think it's a good thing. I'm happy that they're going to only play 8 Big Ten games. I think it'll be better for the sport.
But do you
general,
think this is a problem? What I'm about to state, do you think this is a problem? That first of all, these conferences are too large. They're too large, and they're only going to get bigger. They're not going to get smaller. They're going to get larger, if anything, but they're too large. The reason you play in a conference is to play the teams in the conference. So when
or the reason you play a conference is to get a good TV deal so that you make more money, that's the main reason. But I guess the competitive reason is what you said, but the financial reason is to make more money.
Yes, the origin of conference play was, we've got a number of schools who are like-minded, geographically close, all those things make sense. We're going to form a conference. We're going to compete against each other and determine who the best team is and win a conference championship. Well, we've got a situation in the ACC and the SEC, and it will be such in the Big Ten if they go to 8 conference games, where there will be teams, if they go with the same format as the ACC and the SEC, that particular teams will not see for 6 years. 6 years at a time, you will not see certain teams. Why are you even in the same conference at this point?
Well, I guess they probably could say, Mark, I know it's a football school, but if I said we played them I got to see Ohio State run against Nebraska and win this cross country. By the way, they usually have multi-sport. They usually like 6 teams running that kind of thing, not 2. But so I guess they would say, hey, we're the Big Ten as a whole. Football is the most visible of those, but don't worry, Ohio State and Nebraska, for example, still met 15 times this year in multiple of other sports. So we're still the Big Ten. Of course, I know that that's not how they made the money, but I guess they would try to justify it through the other non-football sports.
Yes,
say that
and you're right. There are 20 some odd sports, and those sports count, and those schools compete in other sports. For our purposes here, and for my own personal purposes, I don't care about any other sports. So we're only here to talk about football. So that's all I care about.
Of course.
But what you're saying in the real world makes total sense to those people within those sports. They're just as valuable, and the sports are just as credible, and all of that. But I just think these conferences, they're out of hand. To have a conference that stretches from Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, which is on the western half of the United States, that stretches all the way to New York City, and conferences that stretch from Boston, Massachusetts, all the way to Miami, Florida, and out as far west as Louisville, Kentucky. And now with the Big 12 expanding, their conference is going to stretch all the way from Utah all the way to Orlando, Florida. The Pac-12 is the only one that's staying within its region.
Farther away, but
in West Virginia. Right. There you go. The Pac-12 is going to be the only conference that is going to stay reasonably within its geographic region, even though if you live
Washington to Arizona is pretty far, but it's still the same region.
Yeah, and they're on the West Coast. Yeah, they're in the same region, the same time zone.
Those are large states those states are so physically large that, you could drive from Washington to California is very far, even though there's only one state in between.
And what's kind of humorous about the geography is sitting here in Connecticut and just thinking about what goes on out west without giving it thought. Utah and Colorado, to me, they seem like, okay, they fit in the Pac-12, Utah, Colorado. But geographically, if you look at mileage, that's just as far from the West Coast as Chicago is from the East Coast. Like it
might be 1,000 miles to the Pacific Ocean from some of those places.
Yeah. But just my thoughts. Too many teams in the conferences, but that's not going to get corrected. It's not going to change. And I love the concept of more non-conference games just because I think the matchups are more interesting. It's more interesting to think about these big non-conference matchups, even not even at the top of the ladder, to think about Minnesota playing Stanford or whoever intrigues me, of just different teams playing that normally don't play. But the reason we have conferences is determine the champion, and the less games you play with more teams membered in the conference, the less legitimate the championship is.
Well, at least, Mark, that might be another reason why it really wouldn't change what you're saying. But if they're really going to drop the divisions and make it, let's say for Ohio State, other than playing Michigan every year, the 7 other teams they play could be drawn out of a hat almost. Well, they won't, because they'll at least do home and homes before they go off the schedule. But maybe that, with the randomness to it, other than one protected rivalry and no conferences or no sides, despite your fact you're playing only 8 out of 14 teams, maybe that will add a little bit more, Mark, than keeping the East and West and still only playing 8 games. That's
true.
Maybe I could just throw that out there.
We need to get somebody who's good at, I don't know if it's necessarily math, but it's logistics, to figure out if the Big Ten would do that. So the Big Ten is doing, if they go through with this, they are doing what the Big 12 does, which is
with more teams.
You're getting rid of the conferences, and you're just taking the top 2 teams at the end of the season to play in the conference championship game. But the Big 12 is safeguarded by the fact that everyone plays each other. Is there a possibility, and this is a loaded question because it depends on scheduling, but I don't know that there is a schedule that can be built that can protect the conference from possibly, and I know that this is a small possibility, but having 3 teams that are undefeated. If they're only playing 8 games, you've got a lot of teams not playing each other.
Right. And you potentially, Mark, could have 4 games, depending on, especially if you play a lower level, keeping with the Continental Alliance. Let's say, for example, Penn State played Oregon State. They're going to win that game, and they play 3 MAC schools. There's a better chance they're going to win all 4 of the non-conference games, depending on how the schedule breaks.
Yeah, I'm not even talking about the non-conference games. Yeah. I'm talking about the conference games.
Right. Yeah, I got a B+ at Ohio State in statistics, but I have no knowledge of how to figure that type of thing out.
Well, it does depend on, you would have to see the schedule. It would depend on how they,
of course,
to a certain extent.
Statistics, because obviously the schedules are different every year. So I guess if every team were equal, you could figure that out. But since they're not equal, that's not a statistical question, except on the game by game or year by year basis.
Without being a statistician, I think I can almost guarantee that it is impossible to build a schedule that prevents that for sure. They would just be, there's just the unlikelihood that your Indianas and Illinois are going to go undefeated. So I think they're safeguarded by just the ineptitude of most of the league and their inability to go undefeated in the conference.
Right, and many of them are of similar talent level, so most likely they're going to have a lot of close games between each other, and that will prevent anyone from winning all of them.
Yeah, and they'll have enough games against, between Ohio State and Penn State and Wisconsin, Michigan, et cetera, to have losses. All right, sir. Well, I appreciate the call.
Mark, I enjoyed it. That was great. I enjoyed the time with you, Mark, and I'm looking forward to the rest. I'm going to get back to work. I am working, but I work from home, so I have some flexibility. I will get back to work, but at the same time, I'll be listening to the rest of the show.
All right. We appreciate it. Have a good day. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark. Thanks for taking the call, buddy. This is Landon from Houston.
Hey, Landon. What's up?
How you doing, buddy?
I'm good.
Not much. Yeah, I want to actually just mention one quick thing of that last conversation. I think what is absolutely probable is not so much the 3 undefeated teams, but having 3 one-loss teams and then trying to sort out the 2 best, like the 2008 Big 12 thing with Texas, Oklahoma, and Texas Tech, where you may have, like, let's say, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and they all beat each other at home.
Sure.
You got 3 11-1 teams. How do you sort that thing out? Like, that's the mess that I think is very probable that could happen. Not so much the undefeated, but yeah, I think you could absolutely have 3 one-loss teams, and that'd be a mess to sort out.
True.
But no, what I wanted to ask you, buddy, do you think that based off of these new conference shifts in terms of Texas, Oklahoma leaving, and I don't mean to promote anything else on your deal. I'm just footnoting where I got my information, if that's okay.
Sure.
I had heard on an ESPN podcast that, and I don't remember the exact year, so I'm certainly open to correction. It's either the last 25 or 30 years, and the reason I think I got 30 in my head is I'm thinking it was probably Georgia Tech in '90, that nobody has won a national championship with a stadium that seats less than 65,000 in the last 30 years. And the only two stadiums that seat over 80,000 just left the Big 12. So given the teams that are now coming into the Big 12 and given what's left, and given the alignment, the alliance that specifically left out the Big 12, and given what the SEC is it fair to no longer call the Big 12 Power 5? Should we now start saying Power 4 group of 6?
Well, it's certainly so. First and foremost, I didn't go through every national champion in my head over the last 30 years, but going back to Georgia Tech to 1990, and even Colorado doesn't have that large of a stadium. They split the national championship that year. I just about guarantee, just skimming through all the teams, that would be accurate, that there would not be a team with less than 65,000 capacity that's won a national championship during that time. So back to your original point here with the Big 12, it's interesting because my first thought was exactly what you're bringing to the table. Because of what we do here in discussing, debating, analyzing, doing all those things is, okay, can I make a determination on whether this should be has the credibility of a Power 5 conference going forward with the subtraction of Texas and Oklahoma? Well, I will say that the conference did as well as they possibly could have. They made the right selections and were able to pull those teams away from the American Conference and independence. So I think they selected the right 4 programs to do so. So they've strengthened themselves from a quantity standpoint. From a quality standpoint, of course, none of those 4 match Oklahoma's production over the last 15 to 20 years. Some of them match Texas's production, but we are awaiting Texas to reemerge. And of course, they don't match Texas's money, facilities, resources, recruiting, any of that.
Correct.
But at the time of that transition and that expansion, I went through BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF's results against the Power 5 over the past 5 seasons, and they're pretty credible.
Okay.
I don't have it right in front of me.
You know, yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure that that would be fair. I don't know how those conference games would necessarily align, like, let's say in the regular season. I think you and I and most of your listeners know we don't know what to do with bowl season over the last 6 years anymore.
Yeah.
There began a slow erosion in the BCS era a little bit, and we really saw it take root after the playoff. So it's really difficult to gauge how good, conference versus conferences and bowl games anymore for all the factors of roster management.
And I'll just say really quickly, I'm sorry
Go
to
ahead,
cut you
go
off. I just wanted to say really quickly, and
You're
that's unfortunate because I was always one
Yeah.
that loved to analyze it from that standpoint to say who did play the best in the bowl games, and can we get a read on this? Because unlike the regular season non-conference games that were scheduled a million years ago, where you could have the second best team in the Big Ten taking on the 10th best team in the ACC, those were like seeded
Yeah.
matchups where, okay, these are comparable teams that should be playing to determine by extension the rankings of the conferences. But to your point, they become less and less credible because of the opt-outs.
Yes. Yeah. And so, that is, a kind of an unfortunate, we've lost that gauge and we've lost what the bowl game, meant, to sort of gauge that. So, I wonder what the matchups would look like, for example, if they played, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, teams that are on the run for a national title that can't afford to overlook, Central Florida, Cincinnati, like Ohio State playing Cincinnati 2 years ago when they had the national championship looking in front of them. I mean, they splattered the blood all over the wall in Columbus 2 years ago. And they had something to play for. What would have happened this year if Ohio State would have played Cincinnati in just a bowl game? Well, it might have looked like Georgia and Cincinnati last year in just a bowl game, right? So
yeah, it's
a little tough to kind of put things on. But no, I was just interested in what you thought, and I know you're kind of for the expansion and stuff. I'm a big proponent of 4 and no more. I do think the committee got it right every year, and I don't think we need more kind of meaningless preliminary games in a playoff setting to determine a national championship. And I just wonder if this new conference realignment, if it would just be better if these alliance conferences that have this whatever nebulous esoteric thing that they're calling, just to add to the joke that you guys were talking about, the Georgia scheduling with Ohio State. Now, if I remember correctly, I think I heard this on Chuck Oliver's radio program, the very day that alliance was made, the very next day, USC went out and made a schedule with Alabama to show how little, whatever that alliance is talking about scheduling, those teams recognize, we're still going to have to cross play. Do you think it's just better for those guys to really separate themselves and let what I'm going to call, I'm not saying you're calling anybody, but let the group of 6 have their own determining? Do we need to further divide what we call FBS football and let these Power 4 conferences schedule within themselves, cross-scheduling throughout the season, have conference championships, get to a 14 playoff, and then let's just settle a national champion with these 65 teams instead of trying to settle it with 130?
If we are most concerned with competition, entertainment, because the best teams are playing more frequently, then your answer is yes. If we're concerned with propping up schools like Fresno State and Colorado State and Appalachian State and giving them kind of a big boy feel, then the answer is no.
Okay. So the individual, or the collective of college football fans would have to, and I think you're spot on. I think that's a good point, Mark, that it depends on what your end goal is. What do you want as the end goal? I would be myself. I would vote for. I'm more comfortable for the former in that, because I don't think you can prop up, given with the rules changes with the NIL and the financial investment it actually takes. I believe it was Forbes magazine released in 2011. Out of 130 Division I football teams, only 26 or 27 turned a profit. That so many of these lower programs are trying to spin themselves into competition, and they can't keep up. They just flat out can't keep up anyway. So I think we're better off, instead of, trying to set a finish line in front of them that I don't think they can actually reach. Let's just go ahead and separate and create further, separation between those schools, and, just kind of play the games out that way. I was just curious and by the way, I wanted to thank you. That little segment you do with Steve Dace every week in the 10-minute war, you guys do a fantastic job with that. I appreciate you guys doing that.
Well, thank you for watching. And I appreciate Steve asking me to do that and getting my take on Michigan football, even though I'm an outsider. So I appreciate him for doing that. Let me ask you one last thing that came to mind based on your perspective on the playoff. I totally get those people that say, hey, the playoff, we're already at a place where we allow teams into a 14 playoff that are not competitive. Therefore, why would we want to expand it and have more blowouts? So you can look at it that way. If your end goal, mine is about competition and inclusiveness to all the conferences. I don't care if we go out. Well, I do from a football watching standpoint, but I don't care if we expand to 16 teams and every game's 52-0. I am looking for fair competition and entry into the playoff. But for those people that are concerned with entertainment, then I understand the point of excluding more teams that are going to get beaten down. However, it hit me during the NFL playoffs thinking, well, if you open up the field and depending on what that format looks like, if it's more inclusive to more Power 5 upper echelon teams, then even though there might be more, there will continue to be some blowouts because of the disparity of talent, the likelihood of us having entertaining first round and second round games of the variety of Penn State and Texas A&M and Arkansas and Oregon playing, those sound like good games to me and would be entertaining. Now, would either one of those teams march on to a national championship? Most likely not. But in terms of pure entertainment, which seems to be the argument that I hear, that is why people don't want more teams involved.
Yeah, and it's not so much the entertainment for the sake of entertainment, but it is the quality at which we're watching. I'm not one of those that think more football is always better. If it's a crappy product, there's a reason people don't watch arena football, like they do NFL or college or something. There is a level of quality that, I want to spend my time watching. I think my counter argument to that, Mark, is twofold. Number one, I don't think we can add any more games. These young men are playing enough games as it is, and they're already unable to stay healthy. We just saw that in the national championship game where Alabama was, pretty close to full strength in the SEC title game on a neutral field. They obviously played a lot better. Georgia was the most healthy they were in that national title game. You could see the contribution George Pickens made, getting him back healthy. The entire defense was healthy. And you take two of the best players on Alabama, you take Jobe, a defensive, and the game was completely different. Right now, we can't finish the season healthy as it is. So you either have to change scheduling, drop to 10 regular season games, plus conference championships, plus this expanded model. I think 15 games has to be the cap that these young men are being told to play. And I don't care if they're making NIL, that doesn't compensate, medical things in future and stuff like that. This is why guys are opting out and not even playing if they're draftable because of the wear and tear on their body. So given the current format with playing 12 regular season games, conference championship, I don't think you can expand it and keep quality because people can't stay healthy already. And I'm not necessarily concerned about representation based on geography. I really want quality. So if at the end of the year, honestly, the four best teams in the country and three of them are Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and, add, I don't care, Clemson or Georgia at the end, that's what I want to see. I want the best. I really don't care where they come from. And that goes more to the quality and earned it. And when I say earned it, meaning the coaching staff that recruited them, developed them, I want all those rewards to come out. You look at Texas A&M, they have a historical recruiting class right now. And if it pans out, I think, I have no problem that being rewarded with the national title at the end of the year. So I think unless you do some restructuring on the scheduling to limit the amount of games played during the regular season, at which point I think I could be okay opening up, because you're not wrong. I mean, I think all those examples you gave are incredibly compelling games. And since they don't mean nothing in the bowl, how can we now make those games mean something? I think Joel Klatt has said that on Cowherd's radio show plenty of times of why he's been persuaded of expansion is you want more teams caring about playing these games. But inevitably, I think we all know, you're going to start hearing the creep of meaningless playoff games. Like that vernacular will take place after a couple of years. You will begin to hear that when you see such an imbalance. If you have a group of five, Houston playing a first round game against then, a Georgia and Ohio State, and, the point spread 17 or what, you're going to be hearing the word meaningless playoff game. So I think, unfortunately, it's going to be tough to preserve, the quality and the value no matter what you do. And, I know it's kind of a vague reference, but it's like that owner of Studio 54 said, man, it's the exclusivity that makes it valuable. The more exclusive you make, the more valuable it is. And I think we need to make it harder to get in there, not easier. And, and again, I would like to see healthy teams at the end of the year, man. And we're having more and more trouble getting that. So yeah, that's my quick response to that.
All right. Good stuff, man. I appreciate the call.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Good stuff.
So in response to the playoff committee selections, I will agree with him halfway. I don't believe that they've gotten it wrong. I don't think that there's an egregious omission on their part. I don't think that we can look at any of the 8 playoff seasons and see where they made a wrong move. Were there omissions that had just as quality of a resume as teams that were selected? So did they make the right decision every time? I cannot say that either. So both can be true. I am not going to defend that they made the right decision every year. I can bring up a number of examples of quality teams that had resumes just as good as the teams that were selected. So they didn't necessarily get it right every time. Did they get it wrong for sure? No. I do not believe that there was a time where I could say they definitely should not have selected this team because this team had a better resume or was just flat out better. Well, actually, I could if we just want to say select the best teams. So we know the criteria that they use has changed. They've been all over the map with that, which is frustrating. They can't defend themselves very well. But things tend to work out in such a way that they don't have too difficult of a choice. For as much as we had chaos ensue up to championship weekend, it fell into place for them this particular season. But 2014, I can make arguments for teams that did not make the playoff, that they were just as good as teams that made the playoff. 2015, I can make arguments for teams that missed the playoff, that they were just as good as teams that made the playoff. 2016, I can make arguments for teams that missed the playoff that were just as good as teams that made the playoff. 2017, I can make arguments for teams that missed the playoff that could have been selected for the playoff. 2018, I can make arguments for teams that missed the playoff that were just as good and had better resumes than teams that made the playoff. 2019, I can make an argument for a team being better that did not have the resume, but everybody in this chat that watches college football knows that that team was better than a team that made the playoff. 2020, I can make arguments for a couple teams that were left out being as good or better than a team that was selected for the playoff in 2020. 2021, I think they got it right. But again, we've got such a disparity in scheduling between Power 5 and Group of 5. Did Cincinnati earn that? Yes, they did everything that they could have possibly done. They won a conference championship game against a pretty good team. They beat Notre Dame on the road by 2 scores. That's their resume. That's the whole resume for Cincinnati. The rest of it, Minnesota could have done what they did with the rest of that schedule. Shoot, maybe Minnesota could have done that with those. Minnesota could have possibly, I'm just throwing out a team. I could say Purdue. I could say Texas A&M. I could say probably about 15 other teams could have taken on Cincinnati's schedule and gone undefeated. They could have. Could Texas A&M have gone undefeated with Cincinnati's schedule? I would have put my money on Texas A&M. Could Wisconsin have taken on? Maybe. You can go on and on. So did Cincinnati earn a playoff spot? Yes, based on the parameters given, they did all that they could. Were they one of the 4 best teams? I don't think so. So again, I will agree with the last caller's statement that the committee has not egregiously messed it up any one season, but every year there have been teams left out of the playoff that had just as good a resume as teams that were included every year. So we've got a problem. We don't have a distinction. We didn't have that in the BCS either. Every year. The last year, the BCS, 2013, we just all assume, okay, Florida State and Auburn, those are the 2 teams that should have been there. Why wasn't Michigan State in the national championship game? We've got some Michigan State fans here in the chat. At least we did at one point. Why was Michigan State not in the national championship game in 2013? I don't know. Auburn 13-1, Michigan State 13-1. Look at their wins and losses. They're comparable. You know why Michigan State wasn't in the national championship game? There weren't enough spots. Not enough spots. Welcome into the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP.
Oh, yeah. What's going on?
None much. It seems like you were on an impassioned rant there. So
I
it's going to be hard to follow that energy.
I just like what the previous caller was great. He had some great points, and I very much enjoyed the discussion. And he was defending the committee, and I didn't get into it with it. I just let him. But he made an accurate statement. But on the flip side, it's not like the committee's choices are ironclad. I don't think that they've made a misstep that's been, again, egregious, obvious, where I could say they screwed that up. That team doesn't belong. This team belongs. But as I just stated, every year I can take at least one team, if not 2 or 3, and say their resume is just as good as this team that made it.
Yeah, well, the thing that bothers me more than that is the lack of accountability and transparency that goes within the process.
Yes.
I want to see how the sausage is made. I want to know which committee members voted for which team, which places throughout every week.
Yeah, there you go. Wouldn't that be something? Because I liken this to an experience I had for 19 years in corporate America, where 12 or 13 people are in a room as a management team, and you leave the room and you have a decision. Now, for the last 20 minutes before that decision was made by somebody, I may have said, this is the stupidest thing imaginable. This is idiotic, makes no sense. It's going to fail. But when I leave the room and get voted down 8-4, then I got to put on a smile and sell this stupid policy that makes no sense.
Right. And I would love, and I mean love, to see which committee members put Michigan State behind Michigan, even though Michigan beat Michigan State.
And they would have to answer for that.
Exactly. But the problem is we only ever hear from the chair, and he might not have voted for it. So he might have to go out there and defend a position that he himself doesn't even hold.
Yep.
And anybody that's ever done that in their life, I mean, it's impossible.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, it's not a fun place to be, is it, Mark?
No.
So that's something I think that would instantly make the playoff committee more manageable, if that makes sense as a word. So, and is easy fix. Another thing that I would like to shift gears on is your topic of villains.
Sure.
And for the discussion, I know you've kind of been all over the place, but is it fair to say with the transfer portal and all that stuff that the villains are now going to become the players instead of the team?
Yes,
And is it fair to say if Caleb Williams does not go to USC, he might be a villain?
He's going to be a villain to Oklahoma fans regardless.
Right. But he's going to be a villain to USC fans because they felt betrayed as if they were getting him for sure.
Yes. I want to see him land at Wisconsin. That's what I'm rooting for. I just think it's funny.
Well, since you brought that up, where would Wisconsin be if they got Caleb Williams? Are we talking like Big Ten title contenders, national championship title contenders?
Oh, they're Big Ten championship contenders. Sure.
Well, would that by proxy make them national championship contenders?
They're already Big Ten championship contenders to a certain extent. I haven't done my deep dive on Wisconsin. I know that they lose a ton on a defense that was one of the 5 best defenses in the country, and I just don't mean statistically. And they got a beast at running back, and they lose their 3 best receivers. So I have looked at it a little bit, but are they they're fringe national championship contenders. They're not Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson national championship contenders. They are Oregon, Texas A&M, Penn State national title contenders.
Oh, see, I didn't realize they were going to lose that much talent. So my follow-up question was going to be, is it possible this is the year where we get 2 teams in a playoffs that's not SEC team? But
well, this has only happened twice in 8 years.
Yeah, but that's still 25%. That's frequent.
Well, you stated it like it happens every year. That's the only reason I said that.
Well, okay, fair enough. Maybe I was a little deceiving.
Is this going to be the year that we don't have 2 SEC teams in the play? Yeah. I have no idea.
Fair enough.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to look at those non-conference games, and what it's going to come down to most likely is if the SEC, the best teams in the SEC, win their big non-conference games, then they're setting themselves up for playing for multiple teams in the championship. When Alabama goes out there and beats Miami in week 1 and Georgia goes out there and beats Clemson in week 1, they're setting themselves up to be in good shape.
Yeah. And then is it fair to another villain I would like to add to the list of villains is Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
He humiliated Florida State.
Yes, he did.
And with not only his decision to go to an FCS school, but the way he made that decision.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you were a Florida State fan, Mark, how would you even go about this situation? Like, how do you root against somebody going to an FCS school? I mean, there's only so much they can do. You can't mean them. You're just so much better than them. I mean, how do you root against that?
Well, I don't want any ill will to be targeted toward Travis Hunter. It's just he has every right to go to school and play football wherever he wants to. Absolutely. It's just at some point in the process, he changed his mind. Like, this is not somebody who committed to Florida State and kept their mouth closed and just tweeted once in a while about they can't wait to get to Florida State. This is a guy that was on campus constantly, was recruiting other players to Florida State, had Florida State all over the place, was talking about Florida State, was going to all their camps, going to all their events. Like, he was Mr. Florida State for like a year and a half before the day that the decision was announced. And then all of a sudden I don't remember. I'm not big into watching I actually go out of my way to avoid these idiotic displays with the kids throwing on hats and taking off shirts. And I've got no time for that. That is a complete waste of my time. So I bypass that. I do everything imaginable to avoid that. So I don't know what he did. I only heard that he went through a bunch of stupid theatrics. And when I say stupid, I realize I'm not 20 years old or 18 years old. So it appeals to them. That's fine. It doesn't hurt anyone. But he went out of his way to embarrass Florida State after he was the biggest proponent for Florida State imaginable.
Right. And he yeeted that. I mean, he threw that hat.
Okay.
So far. He
yeah.
didn't even have a Jackson State hat. Somebody from the crowd tossed it to him. There wasn't even a Jackson State hat.
So what I find so ridiculous is that he tweets out some kind of statement that sounded like it was pulled straight from the civil rights movement in terms of like this historic decision he's made and why he made this decision. And that may be true. I don't know. I don't know why he had this change of heart unless there was something else involved right up until the last second. But why did this, did he have this cause and this mission that just overtook him? And then he made this out to be some kind of just great conviction that he had. And it's like, yeah, sure. It's a bit difficult to believe.
That, but have you the responses to Travis Hunter from the HBCU fans, which there is plenty of HBCU fans for people who have not followed the SWAC or the MIA. They're talking about the Travis Hunter thing as if it is a cataclysmic event, which it is. But they're talking of like Alabama's going down. South Carolina State's going to win the title eventually in like 20. I mean, they're just, they're taking it to the 20th degree, if that makes sense. And it's like, it's just one guy who made a decision. Now, it's his decision. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. I don't care. But to make it a claim as if every player is now going to the SWAC or the MEAC is insane to me.
Well, we don't know that it's insane. It sounds insane, but you can go through whether it be sports history or more important history and look at various landmark decisions that were made that didn't necessarily shake up the world at the time, but then it was proven 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later that was a seminal moment that changed things. Maybe it does.
Well, I'm going to make a bold prediction that Jackson State's not going to win the national title in FBS football in the next 20 years.
Okay.
Call me out. That's a bold prediction, I know. But seriously, people are saying that because of the Travis Hunter decision. So like, I don't see it is weird seeing Jackson State at the top. I'm not going to lie. But I don't see Ole Miss, Alabama, the entire SEC being relegated by the SWAC and the MEAC.
Jackson State
of one decision.
Did get another, I think it was Kevin Coleman, another prominent like top 10 or 15 player in the country.
Oh, and they're probably going to get another one. Deion Sanders has publicly stated they have at least 3 5-stars that have told him they're going to sign. So they're going to get another one in February, at least. I don't know which one it is. He hasn't specified the position or anything, but he said that on various podcasts and stuff that he does.
So because of Travis Hunter being the number 1 player in the country, signing with Jackson State, and Kevin Coleman, the other player I cited, who is the 6th rated wide receiver in the country, he's a top 50 player. Jackson State has risen because of those 2 signings to the lofty position of number 113 in the country in recruiting rankings.
Yeah. Powerhouse team, weren't they? National powerhouse.
You're making me laugh, the real MVP. I am amused with the number of the conversations today.
Well, I'm just reporting on the insanity I've heard of the clown world that we live in, okay? I mean, it's insane to me. It really is insane. But let me ask you this, okay? Let me shift gears. What, in terms of the villain role, Do you think there's going to be some like odd rivalries that we wouldn't have expected from the villain roles, like Notre Dame versus LSU now being rivals because of the Brian Kelly decision?
Oh yeah, sure.
And do you think it would be great if they played in bowl games? Like, just imagine if one of these two teams met in a bowl, like Miami and Oregon. They played in a, you know how hyped that bowl game would be?
And I think you actually brought this up during bowl time that, you know, the way we're trending with these bowl games, it seems like in 10 years, I'm going to be the only one watching these games. But anyway, the way we're trending with these bowl games, maybe that's what we need. We need few people with some brains, college football brains, to sit down and look at, okay, here's the 80 teams we got. Those teams are going to the playoffs. Okay, we got these 80 left. Where are the interesting matchups here? And we're going to have to take it out of the bowl's hands individually and for the collective good of everyone from an entertainment standpoint and from an intrigue standpoint, do exactly what you're talking about and say, you know what? Yeah, let's see Cristobal face Oregon. And let's say, let's see, you know, Spencer Rattler play Oklahoma, etc. Yep.
I would love that. I would love some of these games also to be played at home, like Northern Illinois versus Coastal Carolina. Like, nobody watched that, and hardly anybody watched that game, as you know, because of the video.
Nobody watched the game.
I know. I watched the video.
About that. I don't know.
I watched the video and the game.
People watch these games.
Well, compared to
what is making you draw the conclusion that nobody's watching the Cure Bowl? Don't go by the don't go by the number of people in the stadium. I guarantee you that outside of maybe 3 regular season college basketball games, that there were more people watching the Cure Bowl than any college basketball game the entire season.
Well, from what I've heard, people tell there's a lot more enthusiasm on the side of I don't watch the bowl games than I watch the bowl games.
1.5 million people. 1.5 million people watched the Cure Bowl. And that was 43% less people than last year. So they had a big drop. I don't know what the matchup was last year, but there was more like 2 million people watched the Cure Bowl last year.
Well, Mark, you're able to pull. Can you pull up the Gasparilla Bowl numbers?
That was the Florida UCF game.
Yeah, I'm curious how that compares to.
Oh, a lot more people watch that game.
Yeah, but I just want to know: is it like 8 million, 12? Like,
I don't know.
What is the number?
You're more in the. Instead of 1.3 million, 3.2 million. So close to 3 times as many people.
That's some pretty good evidence right there that I think the regional bowl games would get more viewers. 3 times the viewership. And I think what they should do, I know Uncle Lou's mentioned this idea before, is have the bowl games draft the team. And make it like a public event, like the NBA All-Star Draft, where you go you create an order of the bowl games from best to worst, and then you have a representative of the bowl games pick the team. I think that would be great for television.
Sure.
I think that would be exciting. And you can also have 5 or 6 replacement teams on standby just in case of the virus or people get hurt or something like that. And that way they fill in. And that way they practice and they're ready to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of things
about that.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. I think that would make it more interesting, intriguing. And again, there could be matchups paired. See, the first idea that you presented about some people that had college football knowledge to pair up the matchups that people would want to see, that situation would turn out differently than if you had the individual bowls and their representatives select the teams, because they're going to select, if I've got slot number 1 this year, Ohio State's coming off the board. Boom. They're the most popular team. They're the best team that didn't make the playoff. Boom. I'm taking them. And then I'm not taking Utah. Let's see. I'm going to take maybe a rematch with Oregon, or maybe, but they don't have any play.
How about Notre Dame?
Notre Dame. Okay, Notre Dame. But there's going to be a slightly different. They're always going to take the teams that draw the best. In your first scenario, you were pairing up interesting matchups based on storylines. Those wouldn't always.
I'm just throwing
coincide.
out ideas, Mark.
No, I think they're both good. I like both of them off the top of my head. College football could do so much better promoting itself in so many ways. Just like when I say that should not be some leak of information every so often that Georgia and Ohio State signed to play in 2033 and nobody cares because they can't even imagine being on this earth in 2033. No, look at the NFL. The NFL makes a circus out of their schedule release, and if anyone follows the NFL at all, they know what the schedule is going to be. So this is no mystery to how the NFL schedules, but still they make it out to be basically a national holiday when they release their 2022 schedule. They make a big deal out of it. ESPN's on all day. Fox Sports is on all day, breaking down games that, the Giants and the Redskins are playing in week 3. We knew that the Giants and this is no mystery. This is the most overhyped event in sports, the schedule release for the NFL. I can sit here right now and tell you who's going to play next year in the NFL and get 85% of it correct. But in college football, if there was a schedule release every year, May 1st, schedule release, college football schedule release. Oh, my word. That'd be great promotion for the sport.
Yeah, and imagine the hype of the non-conference game.
Yes.
Imagine if you just found out that Notre Dame is going to go on the road to play Ohio State.
Yeah.
Do you know how much content that would produce by itself?
Yes. We don't need to know that 18 years in advance. We would know it on May 1st. All of a sudden, everyone would be we would all be glued to the TV / the internet for the schedule release for college football 2022 on May 1st at noon, because we would have no idea who's going to play who before that, except for the conference games.
Oh, and then you've got the dynamics of Cincinnati. Who are they going to schedule? They want to make it back to the playoffs. They need an out-of-conference opponent. Which of the teams is going to step up the schedule then?
And a real MVP.
Literally anybody.
Yep. And to make it complete. So to take this great idea of mine from years ago, I've been talking about this for years, and to make it complete, of course, you would take my scheduling system and apply it, and you'd be all set. And bam, the unveiling on May 1st every year. Yeah, there you go.
I mean, it's kind of amazing that just a few people on the internet are able to solve major problems in college football from a 20-minute discussion, but the bureaucrats can't solve it in 20 years.
No, they can't. They're still wrestling with, do we have the top 6 ranked conference champions automatically make the playoff, or just the Power 5 and then the other highest ranked conference champion? It doesn't matter.
Well, clearly, Mark, it matters to the Big Ten. I mean, if the Big Ten's known for anything, it's known for being a fringe conference.
Yes, for being the 7th best conference.
Yeah, they're in trouble. They're in real trouble.
It's mind-boggling.
Well, Mark, it's been good talking to you as usual. Subscribe to this channel if you're not already subscribed. Hit the like button. Subscribe to Mark's Notre Dame channel. And Mark, the final question I will ask you is: if Caleb Williams somehow does go to Wisconsin, are you going to revive that channel?
Yeah, we're going to get cranking on. I think we actually did post a video the other day on Caleb Williams possibly going to Wisconsin.
Okay, because that would be a shame if the voice of college football didn't talk about one of the biggest moves.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wanted to make sure you would do that.
Shining up the Notre Dame helmet as we speak. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Well, Mark, see you next time.
All right, the real MVP. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Real quick before I take the next call, and thank you so much for all the calls. And we got the super chat available. Also Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Search MarkRogersTV. That I did highlight for a few minutes, and I don't know if he's still in the chat. Our guy, Desmond, who hosts our post-game shows on the Voice of College Football, Michigan, and also joins myself and Dre Artis on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on the Michigan channel for our Wolverines live show. He made a statement that is pretty common about that if we expand the playoff, then even in the NCAA basketball tournament, that teams number 69 and 70 complained that they should have made it. I understand that point. However, there are a few distinguishing counterpoints to be made. Teams 69 and 70 have no shot of winning the NCAA basketball tournament. I believe that there was one time, was it George Mason or somebody else that like made the Final Four from those slots? But okay, it took forever. Those teams, it's just, there's just no impact. That's why the selection committee in college basketball, their power isn't that great. Their power is more about where they place the teams in what region, in what seeding, because when you're selecting the top 68 teams in the country, what idiot can, you could drop me out of a plane on championship selection Sunday and just give me a bunch of numbers, and I could come within two teams probably of selecting the 68 teams that should make the NCAA basketball tournament. So they're not determining the teams that are playing for the national championship. Those teams are so well within the top 68 that are really going to seriously compete for the national championship. That selection committee, their power is all about seeding, location, how difficult each bracket is. Did they imbalance or balance the regions in terms of quality? Or is this region way too hard? This one's soft. That's where their power lies. The power with this college football playoff selection committee is the actual selection of the four teams. They hold us all hostage. 13 people hold us hostage, telling us which four teams are the best teams. So the point being, if we go to 16 teams, let's say we go to 16 teams, and they are the top 16 teams in the country, I will no longer have an issue with the college football playoff selection committee because they can't screw that up. They would have to be complete morons to screw up the top 16 teams in the country. Not that I'm going to agree with all 16. I may say, you know what, this team that they've got at 18, they're really 16. But you know what? If you can't make a top 16, then shut up. If you can't make the top 16, you know, you're 9-3, whatever. You don't belong. So, plus that ensures conference champions make it. The answer to those teams that complain is always, it can't be made now, but it could then in the future, hopefully, win your conference. You got no excuses. Win your conference. No excuses. Shut up. We don't want to hear your complaints or excuses. You got a conference. You win the conference. You're in. You can't say that now. As I love to say this all the time, and some of you may roll your eyes because you listen to me way too much, but that's a good thing. Keep listening. That I love to say is, I like to challenge people that don't want to expand the playoff to say, you tell me one thing that any team in the country can do to guarantee a playoff spot. What does a team have to do to guarantee a playoff spot? The answer is nothing. They can't do anything. They're all helpless. If you play in the NFL or any reasonable sport like baseball, the NHL, there's all sorts of, I can tell you all sorts of things. Win your division, you're in the playoffs. Go undefeated, you're in the playoffs. Have one of the top 7 records in the conference, you're in the playoffs. College football, that doesn't exist. The criteria is non-existent. There is no criteria. For anyone who wants to say go undefeated, no, that's not the criteria. If all 5 Power 5 champions go undefeated, somebody gets left out. So that's not a criteria. There is no criteria. It doesn't exist. That's a dumb system. That is an idiotic system. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Willie. How you doing?
Hey, Willie. How's it going?
Pretty good. Got back from picking up my prescriptions, and I've been waiting to talk to you. First, I want to talk to that guy about the injuries. My suggestion for some of these teams is play some of their backups so they don't have to win every game 70-0 in the second half. They play, so these teams run up the score just to get higher in the polls. So if you played some of your backups more, there'd probably be less injuries. Now, as far as the scheduling goes, Ohio State has got Arkansas State and Toledo at home next year. We have to have those games. The guy said 26 teams make a profit in college football. Ohio State's paying, their football is paying for everything down there. Men's basketball is probably going to lose money this year from the looks of the stands. So Ohio State's playing Toledo. They're going to give Toledo $800,000 for coming to Columbus and play. That's probably going to pay most of Toledo's expenses for their athletic department. Our same goes with Arkansas State. So maybe we should cut off a league game and go to 8 so we can still have these kind of games. Now, I have another suggestion for the Big Ten. Not put everybody in a thing. Put Michigan and Michigan State in the West and put Purdue and Illinois in the East. That way, everybody in the conference has to play either Ohio State or Michigan during the regular season. That would solve one problem right there. It would be no different than Ohio State playing Michigan the last week and Alabama playing Georgia the last week and then having them play again. So what do you think of my idea about switching the Big Ten divisions?
Well, I don't like calling divisions East and West if they're not East and West. So that would be my first issue. We could call it whatever. We can call it A and B.
Well, Purdue and Illinois are just about as close as they're close. They're right on the line.
So my next thought is, so you're making the assumption that Ohio State and Michigan are always going to be the best teams, and therefore everyone needs to play one of them.
Yes. It doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out.
Well, I think your theory holds true for one of them, but the other one hasn't met that standard very often, like in 17 years up until this year.
Well, they have a good recruiting class. I think they'll have a decent team next year. They don't have a quarterback unless I don't know what they're going to do, but I'd say that would be a fair way to do it. Or we could keep, the Big Ten East, they win every championship game, but Ohio State's in there. So I think one year Michigan State was in the West, weren't they? Didn't they beat us in the championship game one year?
Well, that was before it was East and West. That was when it was leaders and legends. So that was the last year of the previous format. And then in 2014, of course, Ohio State blew out Wisconsin. That was the first year of the current divisions.
Just look at the championship game last year, Michigan and Iowa. It really wasn't even worth it. Probably everybody turned off their TV sets at halftime.
Sure. They did.
I mean, once Iowa missed that field goal to start the game, you knew they were in trouble.
Well, Ohio State and Michigan would have replayed in the championship game.
Yeah, that would have been.
I don't have an issue with
game
that.
Second time around.
Yeah, sure. In Indianapolis, I'm sure Ryan Day would have been all for it.
Yeah,
I would have been all for
Next
it too. That
year-
would have been fascinating to see those two teams play the next week. Oh man, that would have been great.
Yeah. Hey, you sound like you like my idea.
I kind of like your idea. I've wrestled around with it though. I don't think it's as so. This is what I've done, Willie, and I did this a couple of years, about a year ago, because there was a lot of clamor about the East being so much better than the West. If you take the entire division, Willie, there's really not a disparity between the two. They pretty much split the games. If you take all the regular season games, it's almost even. That's because the West is deeper than the East. The East sucks at the bottom. But that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Obviously, the best teams in the East are better than the best teams in the West. But I don't know so much if that's. I don't know if that's so much an Ohio, an East versus West problem as much as it's an Ohio State problem. And I know Michigan crushed Iowa, but the other two games that didn't involve Ohio State, Iowa and Michigan State came within a foot. The game came down to a foot at the goal line. And the other game was Wisconsin-Penn State, 38-31. Great game.
Well, the game you're talking about, Iowa and Michigan State, is that the game is that the year Michigan State beat us in the rain in Columbus when we had 18 starters back off a national championship team?
Yes.
And you've never convinced me going to my grave we weren't one of the best 4 teams in the country that year,
absolutely.
even with J.T. Barrett running a quarterback sneak every other play.
Yeah.
I mean, we were clearly one of the best teams.
Yes.
So let's just open up the playoffs to 16 or 8. That way, I'm with you. The division champions should get in. Then for the ACC not to want to go to expansion really doesn't make much sense, because I was looking at USC's schedule. And USC is there will be a powerhouse out there with Lincoln Riley. So there's another team that's going to be fighting for the playoffs from that conference that's not fighting. So you've got 2 teams from the Southeast Conference, and then you need 2 more teams. And you've got like USC 1 loss, Ohio State 1 loss, Clemson 1 loss. You only can take 2 of those, and somebody from the Big 12 with 1 loss. So who's going to decide how you're going to pick those teams? Who's going to decide? The Big Ten's probably going to get in because it's a tougher conference. So ACC and the Pac-12. And you've got USC with the powerhouse now. He's going to start getting the recruits out of Southern California that's been going other places, chances are. So what's going to happen there? That's another reason why they need to expand the league champions. And if you go to 8, at least you got the 5 and 3 wild cards. I mean, I don't know why anyone would be against expanding the playoffs when so many, like Notre Dame, they had 1 loss this year. They lost 1 game. They could. I mean, I'm not saying Notre Dame was really a 1-loss team. They had a terrible schedule. But, they had 1 loss. Well, Michigan had 1 loss, and they beat us and jumped up to number 2. I mean, I just don't like how they got 13 guys sitting in a room picking teams that all have the same record, and they're saying this team's better. I think if you got to have the league champions and then some at-large teams, that would solve a lot of the problem, like you said. Then you have no complaints. And one thing about the NFL scheduling, it's already out who every team plays. The schedule's out who you play home and away. It's just the dates aren't announced yet. You can go on and see who every NFL team is playing already, home and away. They just don't have any of the dates announced. Because the Bengals are crossing over and playing Tampa Bay's division. So I'm hoping Brady retires, because that division is going to be bad. And I wanted to ask you again about about, are you coming out with any picks for the Patreon things this weekend?
Well, what do you want me to pick this weekend?
Well, who do you like in that Cincinnati game?
You want me to pick NFL games? I haven't done that in a few years. I used to pick all the NFL games. I don't pick the NFL games anymore. I think, what's the point spread on these games? Do you know?
Well, Cincinnati was around 5. And the Rams, I think that's about 3. The only thing I was reading about that is about the parking at SoFi Stadium. Right now, parking passes are as high as ticket prices.
Hmm.
It's $300 to park near the stadium.
I like the two favorites.
SoFi. Why are you going against the Bengals? I want you to say Cincinnati. It's hard to beat the Chiefs.
Yeah.
The Chiefs are going to be hard to beat, but Cincinnati, I think you're probably right. I would be surprised if San Francisco wins.
If
But
Garoppolo plays
Rams,
like he did against the Packers, then the Niners are going to be in
they'll
trouble.
lose.
I don't think they can win another game like that. He was awful.
No, they're not going to block a punt, and it's not going to be freezing. The Rams are going to put up some points. Plus, they've lost to them 7 times. You can only lose to a team so many times. I mean, that's going to catch up with you, just like us in Michigan. Sooner or later, they're going to have to beat us one time. But that's probably about all I got to say. I got to take my medication since I just got back from the pharmacy. But I've enjoyed your show. I've listened to most of the callers while I've been here, and some of them have some good points. Some of them I don't know what they're talking about. But hey, that's what your show's all about.
That's it.
I've been subscribing to most of your channels and trying to get them up there for you.
I appreciate that, Willie.
I guess I'll just let the next guy come on here, Mark. And thanks for talking to me and taking my calls.
Thank you so much, Willie. Have a good day.
Bye.
All right. So we've got 2 calls right here on the line. Let's take these 2, and we will call it a day. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, what's up? It's Andrew in Huntsville.
Andrew, how are you?
Good. So, yeah, I know y'all are talking about the playoffs. I'm a huge fan of the 12-team playoff and some of the benefits that I think it can add that I don't think that you've gone over is the I think that it will. I mean, having 12 teams and having the 5 Power 5 conferences get the automatic bid, the engagement from so many more fan bases throughout the year, I think would be huge. Especially with just this past year. I mean, you get conferences like the ACC and the Pac-12 that really didn't have a legitimate shot going into the conference championship weekend. And to be able to have a chance to, and in my opinion, I don't really care if you're 8-4. If you win the conference, then you deserve to be in.
I agree.
And you get a conference like the ACC or the Pac-12 where, I mean, that could have had 4 or 5 more teams in each conference that were engaged and thought that they had a chance to win the conference and slide into the playoff. So there's that aspect, and I mean, the other point that you were going over where I don't know if there's really any discussion at that point about the 5th or 6th team not getting in, and that they may have been more deserving than Cincinnati was this past year. So, but the main reason I wanted to call was get your opinion on the Big 12, the new Big 12, and if you believe that they are worthy of being Power 5, because I don't think it's even a discussion.
So somebody asked that maybe an hour ago. And so we diced that up a little bit about an hour ago. And I also put in the chat a link to the video that I produced when the announcement was made. And what I did was I went through BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and who am I missing? Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU's. Anyway, the 4 teams.
Yeah.
their results against the Power Five in the last 5 years. So I went through their results, how good the teams were in the Power Five that they were playing, their record, composite records. And if you really look at it, yes, none of those four compare to Oklahoma's productivity over the last 10 to 15 years. It's not even close. They all actually, to a certain extent,
teams in the country that do.
Yes, they to a certain extent, though, at least measure up to what Texas has been on the field. Do they measure up to their recruiting or facilities or money? No, but on the field, Texas hasn't been any good except for one season. In my estimate, when I say any good, I mean top 25 good, except one season in the last 10 or 12 years. So they've all been as good, if not better, than Texas for the most part. And if you look at their results against the Power Five, pardon me?
Oh, no, go ahead.
And if you look at their results against the Power Five, they're pretty credible. They've all played well against the Power Five teams in the last 5 years. Okay. So from a money standpoint, resources, facilities, recruiting, which should ultimately factor into winning, those things should impact winning at some point. This is a loss. This is a major blow to the Big 12. But if you just look at the results on the field, those four should come close to making up for Oklahoma and Texas if they remain as strong and should be able to recruit. Houston should be able to recruit. Houston is in a wealth of talent. They are in one of the epicenters of high school football talent, the University of Houston. They should be able to recruit more of that talent now that they're in the Big 12. UCF, they have so many advantages of being in the state of Florida, near Disney, NIL, all these things. And now they move into the Big 12. Should they be able to recruit better? They should be able to. So I think there's a shot that those four teams could make up for Oklahoma and Texas to a certain extent. It's not the worst league right now. It's better, I believe, than the ACC and the Pac-12. So it's not like it's the Pac-12 losing Oregon and USC and trying to maintain whatever's left. So I tend to think that it's still a Power Five conference until proven otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a fan of UCF for a long time and following the recruiting and I mean, what's happened in the past, say 6 months since the announcement was made was a type of recruiting that we've never seen before. I mean, the stuff that's going on in the transfer portal is insane. So yeah, I think that they're on the same level as the ACC and Pac-12 right now. And realistically, I mean, those are the leagues that they're going to be competing against anyways. There's no way to consistently compete with the Big Ten and, God forbid, the SEC. But I think that the advantage that the Big 12 may have is that you are adding those four teams that have never had access to that type of money, never had access to that type of recruiting. And it's almost that wild card of what could those four teams turn into. And I think that they absolutely picked the right four. I don't think that there are, selfishly, I hope that they don't add more. I know that there's talk about a second round of expansion in the Big 12. Mm-hmm. I don't think that there's anyone that I would take, maybe outside of Memphis. But yeah, I feel great about it. I think it's going to be a great league that is extremely competitive. I think maybe the difference between them and maybe the ACC. At the ACC, you have Clemson that just dominates every year. But I think top to bottom, it's a more entertaining league to watch. I think it'll be great. So I don't have any doubt that they can consistently compete with the ACC and Pac-12 and be legitimately a Power 5 conference.
The Big 12 did remarkably well Because my thought was, as we have seen with other conferences during this expansion era of the last 15 to 20 years, that they were in a precarious situation for a couple months. They had lost two. They were the smallest conference to begin with. They lost their two most prominent members. So even though they only lost 20% of the league, they really lost like 50% of the league in a number of measurements. So at that point,
Absolutely.
At that point, all those crazy rumors were being bandied about, the Big Ten stealing teams in the Pac-12, Texas Tech and TCU and other schools possibly going to the Pac-12. Well, they were in this precarious situation that once down to 8, if they would have lost a couple schools and they're down to 6, then pretty much it's every man for himself, and those teams would have bailed to save themselves to stay relevant and get to a Power 5 conference, and they would have dissolved. So they were able to stabilize it with, as you said, the same thing. And I even selected those 4 teams before. I don't want to say before they did, but before it was announced, to say those are the 4 best schools you can get, and that's who they got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think without a doubt, I mean, it helped calm people down just with the type of year that the new Big 12 had, and that the league wasn't just dominated by Oklahoma helped. You were able to see Oklahoma State and Baylor have a good year, and Cincinnati have a really good year, and so I think that may have given them some confidence that maybe that they can do it without having the 2 big bullies in the conference.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Well, just wanted to throw it in there, and tired of hearing all this junk about the Big 12. So, all right. Well, you have a nice day.
Yeah. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate that. Yeah, the Big 12 was not great for a few years there in the 2015-16 range. But the Big 12 is certainly not anywhere near the depths of the Pac-12. And the Big 12 right now is better than the ACC. It just is. Look at the results on the field. Now, they can't stack up the wins because they've got 10 teams versus 14. But if you look at the quality of the league and the results that they put out there on the field in non-conference play, the Big 12 acquitted itself rather well. I believe it to be the 3rd best conference in America based on 2021. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Chris. Chris.
Hey, Chris. How are you?
Can't hear me. Good. Oh, I was just going to tell you, I think you might have already seen it. I kind of went back, and I know a little bit about the way, I think you even kind of asked me last time we talked. There was like a dichotomy, I guess, between, what they call the G5, which, I don't know, that's kind of a generic term, I think. I don't know that I don't really, honestly, to be fair, Mark, I don't know who invented that term, honestly, but there was always kind of a dichotomy separating I'll call it the establishment, which is the major conferences, and I guess you could call them the undercards or whatever, the relatively, they're good conferences, but they don't compare really very favorably against any of the establishment. But I went back and I used what it was is I used a database, and what I found was a pretty clear divide between. I've already told you all this, so I sound like a broken record, I'm guessing, but there is like a pretty clear. In other words, it's not just. I don't think somebody just decided, well, we're going to throw these teams over here, we're going to throw these teams over here, we're going to call one this, call one that. And I think what they did was, I think they actually I don't know if they did it, but I think what they used was the history, I think, to kind of decide who should be where. So I think the fact that there's a separation, I don't think that's just by chance. I think, and like, for example, BYU, even though they had a good year this year, obviously, but they would have been in the lower division previous to this year. Probably, if you just like limited it to this year, there might be an argument for putting BYU. I mean, there might be. I don't know. But they were only 8-16 against P5 as an independent, Mark, coming into this year. That's what they were. I think he maybe even knew that. 8-16. That's not great. But
it's relatively good compared to the average G5, I guess. But I don't know that the Big 12 is getting like the greatest teams possible. I mean, they're getting some of the better teams, but it's not like they're getting, Notre Dame or somebody like that. That's even though BYU has a pretty good history against certain teams, but like I said, they only won 1 out of 3, I guess, against the. That's better than the average G5. 1 out of 3 is better than like 1 out of 5 or whatever, but it's not like outstanding. Like, oh, look at they're winning 1 out of 3. I don't know if that really puts them in the highest degree, but that was leading into this year. This year, I think they went 5-0. I don't really know, but did they play other Power 5 teams besides the Pac-12? I don't really remember. Do you?
They lost to Baylor.
Okay.
Who won the Big
That's
12
right.
championship.
Okay. So they're 5-1 then. Well, that would bring it up to, what would that be, like 9-21 or something like that? Which is decent, but no, I'm sorry, I got it backwards. It would bring it up to 13 and 17 or something like that. Yeah. 17, because they would have lost 1 game. I had it backwards, but they're a good team. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I guess what I'm trying to tell you is I don't know that the Big 12 is getting like the greatest teams possible. I think they're getting good teams. I mean, UCF's pretty good. Cincinnati's good. And who are the other 2? BYU and Houston. Yeah, Houston. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think anytime you have to resort to going to after the G5, you're not necessarily going to get a better result. So I mean, it's going to bring them down a little bit. But the other thing I was going to tell you, Big 12 overall, they pretty much maintain their status as a P5. I don't know what'll happen moving forward. That's yet to be seen. But I did the math or whatever, and they worked out to being relative to the scale that I used. They were right at 60%, which is that's right where they need to be to stay as a P5. So really, there's no argument about whether up until now if they've been able to maintain their status. It's what might happen moving forward that has to be determined. And it's kind of like when the Big East, remember the Big East? It's kind of the same thing. When they were a P5, there's really, even though people didn't like the Big East that much, they pretty much kept their status all the way up until, was it 2014? And then now moving forward with the American, the American's probably not quite up to where they need to be to stay. People talk about them being one of the P6 or whatever, but I don't have them as high as what the Big East was. So they're not as good as what the Big East was. They're pretty good, but they're not as good. They're better than the average G5, but they're not anywhere close really to being one of the better. In fact, they wouldn't make the P5 cut probably. Although, I was looking back on the history. One of the requirements for keeping their status was if you could have a team in the final BCS poll ranked top 12. That was one of the things they kind of looked at when, remember when the Big East was, I can't remember, it's like 2008, I think it was, when they had Cincinnati that was really kind of just okay. Well, the thing was Cincinnati, even though they weren't that great, and they played Virginia Tech, I think, in the Orange Bowl, they were at the top 12. And so they kind of, even though they weren't the greatest team, they had Brian Kelly, I think, back then, but they played Virginia Tech, and they played decent against Virginia Tech, and they finished in the top 12. And so that was kind of what they used back then. And so it would be kind of interesting to go back and look, and you could probably look at the American Athletic, and I don't know exactly who finished where, but, like, for example, last year, obviously, Cincinnati would easily be in the top. So it might be that if they use the same criteria that they used to use, then we might be talking about the American being one of those 6 conferences that get an automatic bid. But that's only if they still use that, which they don't. But the other thing I was going to tell you, I kind of think what they ought to do, and I've already kind of brought it up to you before, they ought to limit it to 6 teams instead of 12. And then that would make it, Cincinnati still would have gone because they finished in the top 6. But instead of like including as many as 12, I think 6 might be a good way to select teams. Hello?
So you want 6 teams in the playoff. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I would maybe even include as many as 8. But, in terms of automatic qualifiers, that's what the BCS did, was they limited it to 6 before they expanded it to 12. So we have a choice there. We could either limit it to 6, and that would be the higher standard, right? Well, that would still have admitted Cincinnati because they were the top 6. But if we expand it to 12, then that would include as many as I think Utah might even be included if we went to 12. So, I mean, there's a choice there we have to kind of make. Should it be 6? Should it be 12? And I think I kind of am one of these people that think that the higher the standard, the better. But yeah, I think it's a choice between either top 12 or top 6 is kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, my issue with 6 and 12 has nothing to do with, so for example, the last caller or one of the recent callers liked 12 teams, and I didn't get into it with him. I like the proposal of the 12 teams for a number of reasons. I like the agreement that all the conference champions make the playoffs, the Power 5 champions, that only conference champions receive buys. If there are going to be buys, that the conference champions receive the buys. And I would like there to be an extra incentive given that there would be on-campus games in the first round. What I don't like about 6 and 12 team formats is that I do not believe that there should be buys. And I'm not going to go through it right this second, but anybody that has not heard my rant on buys, you can just search it right on my channel. Just put buys in the search bar and you can find my video where I outline why buys do not work in college football. So I don't want buys myself.
Okay. Well, I have no problem with that. That's, in fact, what I was kind of thinking, and I've already kind of shared this idea with you before. 12 doesn't have to be like in I mean, I know kind of what the 12 team bracket looks like. It was something I wasn't really used to looking at because it has 4. Yeah, it has the 4 teams get a bye. 12. Well, that's only if we do it that way. If we arrange it with 6, let's just say last year, whatever, the 12 teams, put them in 6 pairings. That's not the bye. That's actually a single elimination bracket if they do it. And I know that gets you only down to 3, right? Because you go from 12 to 6 to 3. That doesn't take into consideration that we could always include a 4th team from the FCS. You know what I mean? The national champion.
Yep.
That's the other option. I thought that and that would eliminate the having a bye.
Yeah. So you want to play 12-6-3, and so then you come down to 3, and then you take the FCS champion and insert them as a 4th team. That would be fascinating. I don't believe. Well, there's no question that team doesn't belong. They're going to get annihilated. But
North Dakota State.
Pardon me?
North Dakota State.
Yeah, they're going to get.
They're pretty good.
Yeah, they're pretty good. Pretty good, meaning they should be playing Illinois. Georgia's going to run them off the field.
Well, anyway, that was just my idea. I thought,
No, I'm not discrediting your idea. I think it's fascinating. I would enjoy watching it play out. I would be intrigued to see if they could hang. I would be intrigued. But I think the sample size is there to see that it just wouldn't be competitive. I don't think there's any question about that. You're taking a team that's played a completely different level of football the entire season, and all of a sudden you're just going to drop them in as a 4th team in a playoff.
Well, the proficiency rating that I was telling you about.
Yeah,
that's not based on one sub. That's like when I told you that the WAC was a 40%. That's including everybody. That's why it's so much higher. I think if we went just subdivision by subdivision, I think it would drop to 20%. Do you remember how we were talking about that? How they won 1 out of 5? That's only 20%, right?
Sure.
Well, the reason it's 40%, the reason it's 40% and not 20% is I'm including everybody. So from Division 1, they wouldn't be at 40% if I wasn't including the FCS. They'd only be at 20% probably. That's why they're as high as they are. That's why they're at 40%, not at 20%. That's why it's kind of confusing, right? It's like, well, they only won 1 out of 5, right? That's 20%. Well, yeah, but it's 40% because I'm including the FCS as, as part of the, scale against the scale. That's why it's really kind of confusing. It's like, well, it should only be 20%, but no, they're at 40%. That's where they belong. And that's against that's against the spread. That's against anybody that you want to talk about. That's why it works out that way. That's why it's kind of a different look at it, I guess. You understand?
All right, Chris. Yeah. If there's, was there some sort of concluding point that,
yeah,
in all that?
Well, any team that merits the national, any team that gets to 100% is a national champion. That's what the whole point of it was. It's over everybody. I mean, that's why Georgia doesn't have to apologize to anybody. They're over 100%. It's like getting an 100% on your test at school. It's like, that means you didn't, that means you got the highest grade possible. And that's why I was kind of saying maybe, I'm not saying that proficiency is the answer to everything, but it would help explain why they won the championship, though.
59 and 16.
That means they're the champion over all of Division I.
Yes. I understand you're looking to include everyone and giving everyone inclusion into the playoff process, and that includes FCS. I don't know that most people would agree with that. And again, I think it would be fascinating to watch, but there's no question you're talking about a completely inferior level of football. It's not even comparable.
Yeah.
But it would be fascinating.
Well, it's like 10-1. There's a 9-degree separation between FBS and FCS. 10-1. It's 10-1. 9 degrees of separation instead of 1 degree between FBS and it's 10 or 9. I mean 9 degrees. That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's like it's like 9 degrees is like a huge difference. Yeah, you're right about that. It's huge.
But yes, it would be fascinating to see how that would play out.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. You have a good day.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
I'll talk to you later. Okay. Chris was going to be the last phone call, but I've got 2 more people on the line. Okay. I'm going to take these 2 calls. We've been on here forever. It's been great. I've enjoyed it. Let's take these 2 calls and like people hanging on the line. Welcome into the Voice of College Football.
Hey, good afternoon, Mark. It's J-Dub calling from Des Moines. Thanks for letting me in.
Hey, J-Dub.
Hey, I got to tell you, every time Chris calls, I just have to immediately reach for the Tylenol. When he calls in, all I can think of is a TED Talk. You're familiar with TED Talks. I saw from a statistics professor at the University of Illinois, which is not exactly a weak academic sister, as weak as they might be in football. And he said, if you give me 15 minutes, I can statistically prove to you that none of us exist. You can make mathematics say anything you want. He's talking about putting North Dakota State. Are you kidding me?
Well, yeah.
It makes for a good talking point. It makes for a good talking point, but you know as well as I do, the largest high school class in Ohio doesn't play the smallest high school class in Ohio for the physical safety, if nothing else, of the smaller school kids. You're going to put North Dakota State out there, and they're not going to be playing Colorado or Arizona. They're going to be playing Ohio State or Alabama or Clemson or Georgia or somebody like that.
Yep.
They're going to be in the top 4. I don't worry about the final score. I literally worry what's going to happen to their running backs, what's going to happen to their offensive linemen. I mean, they physically cannot stay on the field with the highest level. So, I mean, it's one of those math things, you know. You can make the numbers say whatever you want, but in the end, you get scrambled eggs.
Yeah, they're, as I mentioned, completely different levels of football and should not be on the same field. And that's why I say, well, I would be fascinated by it, but I just don't believe in taking some team from some different classification and all of a sudden just dropping them into a Final Four that they've not earned, that they earned at some other level. They didn't earn it at this level. He's just trying to create a situation where the national champion, you can truly say they are the national champion because they're the national champion over everyone.
Right. Well, I'm an Alabama grad, and my blood is as crimson as anyone else's. But by God, Georgia was the national champion this year. They earned it. They deserved it. No excuses. They were the best team. And I think we end up getting the best team. I don't always agree. I'm like you. I loved how you described what the committee has done so far, that there are years where you can say, maybe they didn't get this team in that should have gotten in. But then you also can't say the reverse, it's an atrocity that this team is in.
Exactly.
It is what it is. My concern is a simple one. I don't mind the 4, and I could live with if we went to 8. If you told me that the first round would be on campus, and not make the fans travel all across the country to watch. To make the Georgia fans have to fly out to Los Angeles to watch them play Oregon. The game would be in Athens because they would earn it, or whatever the case may be. But my concern is, you got yourself a recipe for chili here, and you're sitting at the stove and you put everything together and it's cooking up and it's smelling good. And then somebody comes in and says, well, you got to double the liquid. We're going to double the liquid. We're going to double the amount of teams that are involved. Well, you know what? Now you don't have chili anymore. You've got watered down soup. You've watered it down. Just what is not working with 4 that everybody wants to go to 8? I think secretly in the back of their minds, there's a lot of people that think, well, we'll go to 8 and it'll include these other teams and it will lessen the chance that these same teams we keep seeing are the same teams we're going to keep seeing. No, you're not. You're going to go to 8. If you go to 8, you think that's going to suddenly, that Alabama's going to disappear, that Clemson's going to disappear, that Ohio State's going to vanish, that Georgia's going to suddenly go away? You're almost assuring that those teams are going to be there every year. I don't see how you're advancing the argument. That's my problem with going to 8.
Well,
but I'm willing to hear the other side.
Okay, that's not my incentive. My incentive is not try to trick the system to break down the power structure. It is up to those individual programs to go out and recruit and develop players and become the best, and to prove that Alabama's not the best anymore, or Ohio State is not as good as they were, and to bring those programs down by elevating yourself. This is what I am looking to achieve. So the first point that you made off of the point that I had made is that I have no fault with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee in regards to the selections that they've made based on the pure fact that they have been limited to 4 spots. But there has clearly almost every year, and I will say I could go through every year if we really wanted to sit here, and I could make an argument for at least one team, and usually 2 teams, that had just as good a resume as one of the 4 teams. So we are leaving teams out whose resumes are just as good, when in 2018, I'll give you one example, Oklahoma's 12-1 as a Big 12 conference champion, and Ohio State's 12-1 as the Big 10 champion. Who do you leave in? Who do you leave out? They had to make that decision. They had to make that, and I didn't get on here and rant and rave and say they made the wrong decision. I just said it's too bad they have to make that decision because they should both be in the playoff.
Right. I see where you're coming from. I mean, they can be right and wrong at the same time.
Yeah. As an Alabama fan,
when you got a situation like that where you've got 2 worthy teams, whoever you select is going to be worthy to be there, and whoever you don't select is going to have a worthy argument saying they should have been the one.
And what it really came down to is that Ohio State had a worse loss than Oklahoma, but they played in a better conference and had better wins than Oklahoma. But the playoff committee did not like the look of that loss to Purdue, so they left out Ohio State. I can bring up this example, and it's similar to the Ohio State case for 2015, but I'll bring it near and dear to your heart. In 2019, Did Alabama earn a playoff spot in 2019? Absolutely not. They did not earn it. They went out there, they lost to LSU, they lost to Auburn, they had 2 losses. They did not earn a spot. However, I sat right here the day of the selection committee when it was LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, the 3 undefeated teams. So those were obvious. And then number 4 was Oklahoma. They were the clear 4th choice, and they earned it. They had only 1 loss. They won the Big 12 championship. And Oregon had just lost a 2nd game, so that broke that tie. But I clearly stated when people asked me, did they get it right? Did they get the 4 best teams? And I said, well, they got the 4 teams that earned it. You know who the 4th best team in the country is. I said, it's a team that didn't earn it.
Yeah.
It's Alabama. Because
Right.
Alabama's not going to go out there and be down by 5 touchdowns to LSU at halftime. They just played LSU, and it was epic. It was a great game. It was a 46-41 game with Tua and Burrow trading punches in the second half. It was a great game. Alabama's way better than Oklahoma. Did they earn it? No. Are they the 4th best team or one of the 4 best? Yes. So how do you want to slice that? And I would love to see those teams given that type of opportunity. Plus, I want to see all the conference champions. I think if you play in a conference and the way this is structured, you have earned a playoff spot. I really don't care what your record is. And for those people that have argued, well, we don't want to see 8-4 teams, which of course would be 9-4 teams after winning a conference championship game, there is the worst record. I will do the exact research, but I got a very good memory for these things. Washington was 10-3 in 2018. That is your worst. 10-3 is your bottom line. People bring up all sorts of Northwestern could have won the Big Ten championship, or this could have happened, but it doesn't. It's not happening. Right. So 10-3 would be our bottom rung conference champion. And I don't think that's so terrible to allow that team into the playoff as a champion.
Yeah, I think, to actually shoot my own argument in the foot a little bit here, because I've always liked what Saban has been saying, and he's been saying it not just recently, he's been saying it for a long time, that the SEC ought to go to 9 conference games, and that he wants to see a stronger non-conference schedule. I mean, Bama just put home and away with Wisconsin, Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Arizona, which is nothing, but I mean, that's, with scheduling the way it is, that's what you do. But his point is, you'll be more inclined to see these teams play these other big teams. Alabama and Ohio State would play each other more often if they knew that the team that lost wasn't imperiling their postseason future with that loss, because then one more is the second loss and you're out. No 2-loss team is getting in. If you go to 8, that 2-loss team might stick around. You might have a 2-loss team that's the best team in the country, and they've got or deserving of being there, and they just got 2 losses because of who they played, the quality of their competition, as opposed to somebody that like Cincinnati. I mean, they got 1 win over Notre Dame. Did they earn a spot? Yeah. Were they one of the 4 best teams? You're not going to convince me of that. So, I think if you go to 8, it allows more room for a team to have that second good loss and still maybe get in. Because if I'm hearing you correct, are you arguing for the Power 5 champions and then 3 at-larges? Is that your argument?
Yes.
Okay, because then your third at-large could be, let's flip the scenario. Let's say that 10-3 game had been Clemson beating Georgia and not Georgia beating Clemson. Then Alabama beats Georgia in Atlanta, and all of a sudden Georgia is 11-2. Are you telling me that Georgia team is not deserving of a playoff shot? In an 18 field, they get one of those at-large bids. So I can see the strength of that argument in that situation where like you were talking about the scenario of Oklahoma and Ohio State in 2018, where there's a team that deserves to be in, and we're not sitting in a room with a couple of guys that don't have to answer to the press arguing, well, this loss was worse than this loss. Throw them in the mix and let's find out what happens when they meet each other.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll get out of the way. I know you wanting to close it up, and I hate calling in and taking up so much time, but
no, I appreciate the call.
I hope we don't. Yeah, I just don't want to go past 8, and let's not have buys. But one more round of excellent football games. If we get good results, I don't think anybody's going to complain about that. Hey, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Great show as always.
Thanks so much for the call. We appreciate it. And the last statement I'll make to that is, again, I want a clarification on the group of 5. So what I mean there is formally include them or formally exclude them. Don't leave them hanging out there in limbo. Formally include them or formally exclude them. Tell them to play their own playoff, or say we are going to award one spot to the best group of 5 champion, the one with the best record. And if there is a tie for the best record, then you have a tie-breaking system. I would include myself, strength of record. Unless there was a head-to-head meeting, of course. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Oh, this is Jeremiah.
Hey, Jeremiah.
So, yeah, yesterday I was trying to chat with you on the chat, but it was hard to do with the delay anyway. You were saying that, is there you were talking about the erosion of the traditions of college football, and people like to say that Texas and Oklahoma, the SEC, is eroding the traditions of college football. But I want to know what tradition in the Big 12, other than Bedlam, has any sort of bearing on the traditions of college football. Because Texas plays Baylor, TCU, and whatever else is not a tradition in this deeply storied in Texas history. I'm just curious what your take is on that.
Okay. You sound like you're in a tunnel somewhere, so I think I caught all that. So, Jeremiah, my first question before I answer your question is, who do you root for?
Texas.
Okay. So, your thought is that there is only basically 2 connections between Texas and the Big 12, and one is coming with them to the SEC, and that's Oklahoma. And other than that, you've got, again, the Bedlam rivalry, which is going to be ending. So, yeah, when you talk about rivalries, it depends on your perspective. We can bring up a lot of games where I think it depends on. Some people believe that teams in a conference, teams in a division are rivals. Others don't. Is Oklahoma, is Texas Tech a rivalry? Is Texas TCU a rivalry? Is Texas Baylor a rivalry? Well, they play in the same conference and have for years and years and years, even going back to the old Southwest Conference days. So how long has Texas and Texas Tech, TCU and Baylor been playing each other? Forever. So that seems somewhat substantial.
I mean, yeah, but a lot of with the SEC, I mean, since I lived in Houston and, it's close to LSU, I mean, sometimes the fans would joust with each other. And the game was quite a couple years ago when LSU came to Texas to play. It was quite the environment. So, I mean, it's not necessarily a rivalry, but it's a rivalry that though, you know, this thing about playing Baylor and Texas Tech is they seem to care more about Texas than they actually care about their own teams to an extent. I mean, to me, it seems like they're more of closet Texas fans than they are actual Texas Tech fans, because everything that centers around those seasons is trying to play Texas and beating Texas or beating Oklahoma. I don't feel like they have this vision that they're going to go and compete for a playoff spot, or they think they're actually on the same level as those universities, so they try to play up to that level. If you get what I'm trying to say about those conference opponents you mentioned.
Okay, so your basic argument is that Texas and Oklahoma are leaving the Big 12 for the SEC, and it really doesn't disturb any type of loyalties, rivalries, allegiances, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, as a Texas fan, I just don't think that, you know, it's hard to like get hyped to play Baylor, even if Baylor is a good team. It's not the same as you go to the SEC and you're playing LSU and Ole Miss and Alabama and Texas A&M during the regular season. You know, I just don't think the games are as significant.
So I'm not saying this.
As they used to be
Okay, so I'm not saying this as a knock in any way, but basically you're more invested in being excited about playing a brand or a shirt or a helmet than an actual team.
I mean, it is a team. I mean, it's a brand, but
Baylor and Oklahoma State were better than the teams that you just mentioned this past season.
Yeah, they're better, but they're not like. I'm trying to find a way to explain it, but they're just more significant. They're more. If you beat them, I don't know. There's more attention to the game. There's more eyes being drawn to the game. You know, the early Big 12 in the early 2000s was probably one of the best, if not the best, conferences in college football. When A&M and Nebraska and Colorado and Missouri were all in there. And after that happened, you know, they expanded the Big 12 to include some more teams. And the Big 12 kind of lost their level of play. And the level of play and attention and eye-grabbing dropped significantly. And the Big 12 fallen off as a result. But I don't think that Texas is going to play Arkansas, LSU, and the old rival of A&M. I think those are more significant games than any game on the current schedule other than OU. So maybe it's just me as a Texas fan, and maybe if I was an outsider looking in, maybe I would see it differently.
No, I understand your point.
I'm curious what your...
I understand your point. Your point makes sense that from a brand name standpoint, and most of the time that is reflected on the field, that LSU's usually better than TCU and Oklahoma State and Baylor most of the time, even though they weren't this past year or the year before. Obviously, LSU just won a national championship 2 years ago, and to think about Baylor or Oklahoma State or TCU winning a national championship is a bit nonsense, even, and I may offend their fan bases right now. And I know that they've been close to being playoff teams, but being close to playoff teams and being a national champion are light years away. Yeah, you make total sense based on recognition, based on brand and history and size of fan base and money, and all those things make total sense that Texas will be playing against higher competition, even though maybe in a particular year it's not as good or better. Most of the time it will be more exciting games that bring more eyeballs and more attention because it has the brand on it: Arkansas, Texas A&M, LSU. in place of Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, etc. Yeah, it makes total sense. Texas is better start developing its talent much better, or some of these second half collapses that they have won't be second half collapses because they will be down 35-0 in the second quarter if they don't start coaching up their talent better.
Yeah, I mean, our season last season definitely had a lot of problems. There was some locker and tension with some of the players, and some of those players have departed since. Hopefully we don't have that same problem again. And I think next year will be a lot better. How much better remains to be seen. But I think Texas might have a significant improvement to maybe a 9-3, 8-4 season. Nothing crazy, but step by step to get back to it. They had some huge deficiencies, as you mentioned before the season started, at the O-line, specifically, and as well as receivers. They just didn't have the reliable target other than Xavier Worthy. So I'm excited for next season and then move to the SEC. But yeah, I just wanted to see what your take was on the, is it a tradition of college football voting? I would say yes, but I don't think Texas and Oklahoma necessarily fit the bill for that. It was nice talking to you, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. Thank you so much for calling. Appreciate that. All right. I've taken like 5 more phone calls than I said that I would, and we've been on here for 4 hours and 15 minutes. Good Lord. All right. And we've only got like 50 people on the line. So we have certainly run our course. So I appreciate the people that are waiting online, but keep in mind, we've been on for 4 hours and 15 minutes. So that's well beyond our time frame. Appreciate everyone being here. We've got a West Virginia show coming up tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time right here, the Voice of College Football right here on the main channel. West Virginia Live at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We will have more call-in shows headed your way very soon, and we will see you then. Please check out my video that's connected to a lot of what we've just talked about with the Big 12 and the 4 newest editions. I've left that in the chat. If you can't find it, of course, just go to the channel and search BYU, Houston, UCF. Put those teams in there, and you will find the video where I break down how they have fared against the Power 5 in recent years. And, of course, we've got our conference rankings that are coming out. I see that nobody's really concerned about the whoever was last, the Sun Belt Conference. So anyway, appreciate everyone, and we will see you next time here at the Voice of College Football.